I've seen the fire in our nation's eyes when anger prowls for prey. I've heard good people draw their lines and call it holy rage, but the cross was never raised to bless the stones we throw. And if mercy leaves the house, there's something wrong down in the soul. Words ain't bullets, but they can hit the same. And once a heart turns cold enough, it forgets what grace is for. There's no room for hate in America tonight. No room in the home where the children need the light. No room in the heart where the Savior's supposed to stay. If Jesus owns the house, then hatred don't got no place. No room for hate. No, no room for hate. No room for hate. You can wave a flag above it, you can quote a verse or two, you can dress it up like justice, till it almost sounds like truth. But outrage ain't righteous when it changes with the side. And you can't love your neighbor, treating them like they're downrange. We're all image bearers, breath of God and dust. And you don't heal a broken land by teaching it not to trust. There's no room for hate in America tonight. No room in the home where the children need the light. No room in the heart where the Savior's supposed to stay. If Jesus owns the house, then hatred don't got no place. No room for hate. No room for hate. No room for hate. Drag it to the cross, lay it in the ground. Let the blood of Jesus turn the whole thing around. Truth can still be spoken, courage still can't stand, but rage don't get to rule the soul of a faithful man. There's no room for hate in America tonight. No room in the home where the children need the light. No room in the heart where the Savior's supposed to stay. If Jesus owns the house, then hatred
Hello, friends. Do you have a moment so that we may discuss our Lord and Savior Minarchy? No, seriously, I'm just kidding. Hi, my name's Rick Robinson. I am the general manager of KLRNradio.com. We are probably the largest independent podcast network that you've never heard of. We have a little bit of everything, and by that, what I mean to tell you is we have news, pop culture, special events, conspiratainment, true crime, mental health shows, drama productions, and pretty much everything in between. So if you're looking for a new podcast home to grab a little bit of everything that you love all in one place, come check us out. You can find us on X under @KLRNradio. You can find us on our Rumble and our YouTube channels under the same names. You can also find us at KLRNradio.com and pretty much every podcast catcher known to man. So again, feel free to come check us out anytime you like at KLR.
Celebrity designer Jeff Lewis is back with Hollywood House Lift.
I'm excited to be working with new clients.
I'm not getting rid of that.
I hope I never see you both again.
Yeah. An all-new season.
Those have to go. That has to go.
From oh, wow.
It's been an actual nightmare.
To oh, wow.
This is such an upgrade.
With celebrities like Josh Duhamel, Christina Ricci, and Gina Rodriguez.
Dazzle me, Jeff.
It looks like Chuck E. Cheese.
Stream an all-new season of Hollywood House Lift with Jeff Lewis. Now streaming on Freevee.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening.
In uncertain times, we could use someone to lean on. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma will stand by you with plan options to fit your budget. If you've recently lost your job, had a baby, or moved, you can still get the healthcare coverage you and your family need. Financial help may be available for those who qualify. Call 855-452-BLUE or visit hereforyouok.com to see if you're eligible to enroll. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma, a division of Healthcare Service Corporation, a mutual legal reserve company.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
The following program contains coarse language and adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
From red dirt roads to the Capitol steps, Rick's calling truth, no time for regrets. Fire in his voice, facts in his hand, talking sense to the heart of this land. It's the Rick Robinson Show, where the truth rides high. No spin, no script, just an eagle in the sky. From D.C. to Tulsa, he's calling it out. Mic in his hand, yeah, he's got the clout. Heartland Radio, raw and real. Tune in, speak up, and feel what we feel. He's breaking down the noise, cutting through the lies, shining light where
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody?
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
Otherwise known as Chat Lives Matter Day, right here live on KLRNradio.com. I am Rick Robinson, opening act and general manager, KLRNradio.com, host of The Rick Robinson Show, and host and co-host of many others because I'm a workaholic. Let's crank this back up for a minute, shall we?
Parade from the plains to the power, he's speaking it loud with a mic and a mission that makes us proud. Talk for the people, talk that's real. The Rick Robinson Show, where we say what we feel.
And welcome back into the program, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump is in China and CIA is in the hot seat on the Hill over the China virus. Coincidence? I think not. I don't know. I don't know how much pre-planning there was in this, but I find it really ironic that he is about to start a negotiation with China over trade. With this now looming front and center in the news cycle, I have to admit, it changed the entire trajectory of my show. We'll get to the other stuff and probably later on in the show, but we got to start with this. So go tell a friend, because if you missed it, I've got the entire opening statement of the CIA whistleblower, which is really confusing when you think about it because reasons. I don't know what just happened. I had chat on the screen and I saw it and then it went away. We're still live though, unlike Friday. I was really annoyed Friday because we were doing our best work in the last 15 minutes of the weekend news roundup and the system hiccuped and never told me. So I'm going to try to do something real quick just to see if I can make this work right again. Because, yeah, I don't know what just happened. Anyway. Hey, this is a real college football team, bitch. Wait, I went away too. Am I back now? Can you see me? Am I back? Am I back? Am I there? Am I there? Waiting for a response. Anyway, so I'm assuming since he said that at what 11:11 and 54 seconds and then responded, I'm guessing I'm back now. Okay, there it goes. I think it's starting to populate now. Okay. Okay. So yeah, sorry. I was just making sure. And this is a real college football team, bitch. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry about your taste in football teams, but apparently it sucks. Anyway, all right. So again, tell your friends because in about 30 seconds or so, I'm gonna put up the entire opening statement from the CIA whistleblower, who, according to the CIA, isn't a whistleblower. I do find this really weird, by the way. The fact that it's Republicans trying to find out what's going on, what went on with the coronavirus, and apparently it's the CIA going, he's not really a whistleblower, but because he didn't request whistleblower protections, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I'm making sure everything's loading right before I start doing everything else, because I don't know what happened, but there was a hole in the space-time continuum for about 30 seconds there. I think everything's going back to normal. All right. So this is a longer clip, but we're going to play the whole thing because it's kind of relevant to most of what I'm going to be talking about for hour one. Because, and there's a reason we play like 10 minutes worth of crap before I start talking. YouTube has a weird rule about if you say anything, especially within the first 10 minutes of a broadcast, the algorithm immediately finds it and you usually get ganked. So for everybody who's complaining about all the stuff we play in the beginning on the lives, it's because we kind of have to, because we're always on the knife's edge, especially with YouTube, even though they've supposedly changed all of that. Because everybody remember when all this stuff started and we tried to tell you exactly what was happening, who was involved, and we got ganked to the point where our YouTube channel had no reach. Nobody could find us on X anymore. And back then we were just using Spreaker as our backbone, but even that got buried and is still basically buried to this day. Occasionally we break through and then get the kind of numbers we used to get. And I see that and I'm like, maybe they fixed it. And then it goes back to normal. So, but yeah, there's a reason after trying to figure all this stuff out over and over and over again, there's a reason we run all the junk in the beginning. So best rule of thumb, show up usually about 10 minutes in if you want to watch the live and not worry about any of the other stuff. But I usually try to play like cool music and stuff in the very beginning anyway. So it's still kind of awesome in my opinion, but it's awesome because we usually are the ones that wrote it. All right. I notice Andrew hasn't said anything about my football team again. Bastard. All right. Anyway, entire opening statement. Here we go.
Good morning, Chairman Paul and other members of the Oversight Committee. Thank you for the complimentary introduction, and I appreciate the committee's dedication to transparency and accountability. I am a career CIA operations officer, and as you mentioned, I was on joint duty assignment at the Office of Director National Intelligence Directors Initiatives Group, or the DIG, between March 2025
Andrew, sure.
and April 2026. I was responsible for leading the DIG's investigation into COVID origins, anomalous health incidents, and unidentified anomalous phenomena. I'm here today to discuss the COVID cover-up, the national security implications associated with the DIG's investigative findings, and CIA refusal to comply with lawful oversight, as well as how we remedy these problems. Intelligence community leaders and senior analysts downplayed the possibility that the COVID pandemic originated as a result of a lab incident. Motives are difficult to define given the scope of the DIG's review. Intentional or not, the IC's actions resulted in a cover-up, wasted resources, and a failure to properly inform policymakers. Public health policy would have been very different had the American public been made aware that a virus from a lab in China was going to serve as the foundation for an emergency use authorization mRNA products being mandated by the former administration. Dr. Fauci's role in the cover-up was intentional. Dr. Fauci influenced the analytical process and findings by leveraging his position to ensure the IC consulted with a conflicted list of curated subject matter experts, public health officials, and scientists. This included some of the authors of the paper, The Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2.
All right, so I'm going to stop right there. One of the reasons I want to play this whole thing is because I have things I want to say in the middle. And for the record, Andrew, I did not intentionally censor you if you were not joking. Unfortunately, Restream has a censor list, and so does the XChat, and I can't control either one. That being said, I got to stop right here because I have to take a moment and say, we told you. Stacy and I'm sorry, for those of you that have been listening for all, you're like, he's going to say it again. Stacy and I started a morning show in 2020 because I used to work for the University of Oklahoma through contract for the Department of Human Services of Oklahoma. And even though when we started working there, a lot of folks were starting to do the whole work from home thing, we were told it was never going to happen. And then COVID happened. And then they were like, well, we don't know if we're going to just shut down for 2 weeks or if we're going to figure something out. So eventually what they did was they sent us home for the 2 weeks to slow the spread thing. And then what happened was it lasted longer than 2 weeks, but I didn't know that at the time. So because I live out in BFE, I'm not going to explain that for those of you who don't know. You should, but it's a colloquial term. You should be able to find it on Google now. So because it took me forever to get to work, I started a morning show so that I didn't get used to rolling out of bed and being able to clock in at 8:30 and do my job and just leave again. But again, 2 weeks. So for that first 2 weeks, we were hot and heavy trying to tell you guys everything that we were finding. Stacy, who happened to at the time write for PJ Media, is an excellent researcher. And she was doing all kinds of research and telling everybody what she could find, where she found it, where you could go look. And she kept getting smacked down. It got so bad that PJ started having to put her articles behind a paywall so they didn't get ganked. Well, that was around the same time that we got ganked. And part of it was the name. We were having fun with the whole thing because we thought it was only going to last 2 weeks. So the entire, the show, and we had a lot of fun with it, and, started playing things like this. And hang on.
China is asshole.
And had a show called the Kung Flu Spew. Anyway, because that was kind of the whole thing, it was a joke on the masks and everything else. And we started trying to tell everybody what we were able to find. I being me doing a lot of the talking and Stacy doing a lot of the research. And we got ganked. But one of the first things we tried to tell you is what this guy said in the very first, what are we in, 2 minutes and 21 seconds? He said the entirety of what we spent 2 weeks trying to tell you in 2 minutes and 21 seconds. And then, of course, the CIA releases a statement today from their spokescritter that says this guy is not actually a whistleblower. He never applied for whistleblower protections. Why would he? Because the government does a terrible job of protecting its whistleblowers, even though they're the reasons those laws were invented in the first place. He's also only there because he was subpoenaed, probably because you wouldn't have let him off work without the subpoena. And then you said, and we've already admitted this was likely a lab leak. So what's the big deal, y'all? And now we're going to get into the rest of the big deal, because here's the part they're not telling you. But he is. Dr. Fauci knew, and Dr. Fauci steered everybody away from it. So what you're about to hear, because none of the Democrats showed up, but trust me, I'm not trying to pull it, trust me, bro, I'm really not. But what you're about to hear from Democrats after this hearing concludes is, let's not forget who the president was when COVID started. Which, anything that you guys want to lay at Trump's feet over this, I'm fine with. I am not a huge fan of Operation Warp Speed. I thought it made sense at the time until I realized that the same person that was, pulling all the strings for this was the same person trying to do the cover-up. So, the cover-up that never happened. Anyway, let's get back to this. Otherwise, this entire clip's going to burn up an hour because I'm ranty today. Anyway, here we go.
And other public health experts who have been in his orbit for the last 20-plus years. Some of the scientists were part of the Biological Sciences Experts Group, or the BSEG, an office of Director National Intelligence Advisory Body, whose members often receive considerable funding from NIAID and public health agencies. The BSEG scientists influence national laboratory, WMD research, policy decisions, finished analysis, and other intelligence matters, creating misaligned incentives and conflicts of interest, as well as counterintelligence issues. Since 2006, the BSEG consulted part-time on biodefense issues for the IC, while conducting government-funded research and holding academia positions, as well as maintaining roles in public health institutions and serving as members in the National Academy of Science. They receive funding from NIAID and other agencies for vaccine research, USAID's PREDICT project, the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, and even worked with Chinese scientists on coronavirus and other pathogen studies pursuing vaccines. There was no oversight monitoring how this web of relationships influenced research, policy, and public health in any holistic way for over 20 years. In fact, several of the BSEG scientists helped Dr. Fauci rewrite definitions of gain of function in 2015 to lift a funding pause on dangerous research. Still others participated in planning Event 201 in 2019. This was a coronavirus pandemic tabletop exercise curiously similar to the events that played out during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was attended by Dr. Fauci and individuals with IC ties like former DNI Avril Haines. The CIA and DNI analytic managers responsible for examining the origin of COVID made decisions inconsistent with the conclusions of subject matter experts and analytical tradecraft, consistently favoring the theory of zoonosis or natural origin. Following the CIA's COVID relook that culminated in 2023, the CIA retaliated against analysts supporting the lab leak hypothesis. CIA analysts were not bribed. The analysts that supported the 2023 lab leak conclusion took every administrative measure available to them to address their deep concerns regarding the analytic integrity of their finished intelligence. CIA managers retaliated against them for their refusal to agree with management's middle of the night, anonymous rewrite of the analysis, which changed the assessment to a non-call judgment. Dr. Anthony Fauci's influence over the IC's COVID origin analysis and the witting and unwitting role some BSEG scientists and IC personnel played in the cover-up exposed why this issue is of deep concern. Failure to address the United States government's inability to differentiate between public health and biodefense and the oversight-resistant ecosystem of life science actors has been fertile ground for increasingly dangerous continental United States gain-of-function research, as well as similar research conducted in U.S. government-supported labs abroad. Post-9/11 changes in public health and biodefense roles and responsibilities have blurred the lines between scientists, the military, the intelligence community. It has resulted in a deliberately opaque and excessively redundant biodefense research policy and financial infrastructure, seemingly intended to escalate bureaucratic bloat. This is a national security crisis caused by the inability to provide real oversight. The systematic failures associated with muddled boundaries between biodefense and public health and an overly complex infrastructure have been exacerbated by documented efforts to circumvent oversight. CIA did not comply with lawful oversight during the Diggs investigation. The behavior significantly impacted Director Gabbard's implementation of several EOs issued during this administration and tasked to the Dig. The CIA refused to provide information necessary to understand why analytical standards at the CIA. The CIA illegally monitored the computer and phone usage of Dig personnel, their investigations, and contact with whistleblowers. These were Americans being spied upon illegally while executing duties directed by the President and under the authority of the Director of National Intelligence. One CIA contractor assisting with the Diggs investigation into the events that transpired between 2022 and 2023 was fired by the CIA one day after meeting with the Dig. When the Dig ceased operations, the CIA also took back 40 boxes of JFK files and MK Ultra files being processed for declassification by DNI Gabbard.
Well, that just seems a little weird.
The legislative and executive branches will continue to be misinformed if this type of behavior is not addressed. The partial solution to dangerous gain of function has already been laid out in Executive Order 14292, improving the safety and security of biological research. We need a comprehensive review of government-funded life science research and a move back to pre-9/11 definitions of gain of function and WMD research, particularly in the IC and DHS. More broadly, we need effective oversight. We must hold agencies responsible for failure to comply with Executive Order 14292, and oversight must have teeth. You must be willing to pull the purse strings, and if necessary, convene another church committee. The results of our investigation would have been impossible without whistleblowers willing to come forward. They are indispensable agents for reform. Despite statutory law, agency regulation, and training requirements, whistleblowers are almost never protected. Whistleblower protections always seem to protect the agency. Every time the CIA investigates itself, they coincidentally find no wrongdoing. When they do identify issues, they hold the system responsible. That last statement is a verbatim response from a Europe and Eurasia Mission Center lawyer when the CIA Office of Inspector General did identify shortcomings so serious, oversight bodies were holding meetings about it 3 years after the events transpired. It was in response to the question, was anyone held accountable? Apparently, the system is good enough. The only way we solve this issue is with real accountability for failure to comply with executive and legislative branch oversight and an escape valve where whistleblowers can continue to contribute to mission free from retaliation. All IG elements need to be removed from the agencies and fall under a separate entity controlled by the IC Inspector General. The personnel in IG elements should be 1811 certified with regular DOJ and legislative oversight reporting responsibilities. Thank you, and my written statement provides far more details related to these issues. I look forward to your questions.
All right, so there you have the entire opening statement from the guy who came forward to try to tell a lot of us what we already knew. Of course, the media is probably not going to talk about it, and I've got another interesting clip in a second I want you guys to watch, because there were other people that were completely disinterested, and you can actually see it in the shot, but I want to I want to go ahead and take that a step further, so hang on just a second. Okay, so this is going to be a clip from Fox News, but it also highlights one of the things that I want to drive a point home across. And here we go. And yeah, Andrew, I know I already put it in the chat, but I agree with you. This was probably one of Trump's biggest failures regarding the COVID stuff. But at the same time, I mean, you have to understand, dude was not a politician, and he believed he could trust the people with the right letter behind their names, and found out the hard way that he couldn't. And thought he could even trust some with the wrong letter behind their name because they were friends until 5 minutes ago. I think he's learned a bit of that lesson. I don't know if he's learned all of it that he should. We might not be taking a break this hour because there's just a lot to cover, and we're already at the halfway point. So anyway, here's the next bit.
You could see over the left shoulder of Senator Ron Johnson the empty seats of Democrats, and we can show. I mean, look at that room. And even James Erdman, who is the whistleblower witness today, was asked about, and I believe it was Senator, yes, Bernie Moreno, who asked him this, how does that make you feel knowing that those Democrats aren't there? And he says that, of course, I wish that they were. I mean, you want everyone to know what he has to say. What is the take on his role on this, though, from Democrats? I know you said that there might have been kind of a joke moment with one of them, but they can't completely ignore this.
Well, they are ignoring it, apparently, Harris. We'd love to ask them what they think about this testimony, but they're not here. They're not in the room. And the witness has given some pretty interesting testimony so far. You know, he's part of the CIA, active member CIA. He said that in August of 2021, the intelligence community was ready to basically declare that this the COVID-19 pandemic began as a leak from that Chinese lab in Wuhan. And then the witness says that Dr. Anthony Fauci injected himself into those discussions, into the intelligence community, and was able to influence those conversations. Wow. Change from the potential lab leak theory to just a neutral theory. So we'll see what else he says in there today.
So the one thing that, and this is just, you know, as somebody that's done production work and stuff now for a while, the one thing that I will say I wish they had done differently, since none of the Democrats showed up other than, you know, I think one of them came in to register dissent and then walked out. They really should have just spaced each other out throughout the dais, so no matter where the camera was, you could see the empty seats. I think that probably would have driven the point home a little bit further. But who am I to judge? Because I'm not there. Give me just a second. Sorry, I'm still in the process of pushing out the feeds everywhere that they have to go, because some of them I have to do manually. All right, so we're back. We're live. I know I probably should have went ahead and taken a quick break and then done that, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Okay, so let's talk about this from another perspective, from somebody who went through it. I'm going to say this again. Now that all of this stuff is starting to come out, if I were a medical professional, unduly impacted by the fact that I was trying to be honest with people about what was happening with COVID and what could actually help them, I would find an attorney like now. Here's the thing. Look, I get it. We as Americans are inherently distrustful of our government. And a lot of us stay that way no matter who's in charge. But there are folks who believe all of the propaganda. And when I say propaganda, I want to remind you guys that there are people that were embedded with Hollywood until Hollywood basically burned down. Thank you, Karen Bass, for that. Don't necessarily even mean that tongue in cheek. Just saying. I know it didn't take all of Hollywood with it, but it might as well have, because none of them have homes in that area anymore. But look, there were propaganda arms on file with Hollywood for the FBI, the CIA, and pretty much every other alphabet soup organization that you can think of that were tasked with rehabilitating the images of those particular agencies. And that's where the whole mom and apple pie and wrapping them in a flag thing came from. Look, the CIA has a very distasteful job, and I will be the first one to tell you that. The FBI, in some cases, has a very distasteful job, and I will be the first one to tell you that. The problem becomes when they start turning those lenses and cameras and sniffers and everything else back around on me and you, which the CIA is never supposed to do, or they weren't until 9/11. USA even tried to let the cat out of the bag back in the day with a show called Covert Affairs. And again, I'm going to say this. I think a lot of the stuff that comes out is a subversive way for some folks in Hollywood that actually give a damn to tell you the truth. Look at what happened when I was a kid with all these back to school specials. There were all these stories about kids that were being abducted and terrible things were happening to them. And then the first time somebody let one of those loose, somebody behind the scenes said, no, it's fine. We'll just slap a label on it and call it a back to school special and tell them that we're trying to tell people about how to better pay attention to what their kids are going through. Same thing happened with the FBI and the CIA. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just the truth of it. And we've been watching some of this as it happened in real time if you've been paying attention long enough. The idea that this whole thing could have started from a wet market is insane. The more plausible idea was the one that was right in front of us all the time. And for some reason, the CIA is still only willing to admit that part. I have to ask why. With everything else that we now know, with everything that we have come to understand, why is the CIA, while there's a Republican in charge, and the Republicans are leading the control of the House and the Senate, although by a fingernail, which we as Americans need to figure out how to fix. Because at least then we give them the chance to do the things that they say they're going to do. And if they don't work, we can figure stuff out. Or if they don't do it, then we can figure stuff out. But as long as we keep sending this breakwater into Congress, nothing is ever going to get done. Nothing is ever going to get accomplished. We're now watching the Speaker of the House lamenting that he doesn't have the votes to get rid of the filibuster. That's your job, motherfucker. If you don't have the votes, you get somebody within your caucus, because that's why you have a majority whip, to get people on your side and explain why it needs to happen. Not just go to the American people, hat in hand, milk toast is a mofo. Well, we tried, we don't have the votes. Really? Did you show us that you tried? Where's the votes? Where's you calling it to the floor? Where's the up and down vote so we know who the hell to go after? Since they're not willing to do the will of the people. The reason I'm talking about this in the same breath that I'm talking about that is these are all symptoms of the same damn problem. And the people that have been trying to tell you about it were pushed under thumb, censored into oblivion. A lot of people that I know that were doing this kind of work when we were doing this stuff aren't even in business anymore. They're gone. They gave up. They quit. News to you guys, I'm too damn stubborn. So keep coming at me. I don't care. Throw whatever you want to throw at me. I don't care. I am not going away. I don't care if I have to be one of those people standing on the street corner holding up a piece of cardboard that says this is the truth. And I don't care who thinks I'm crazy for doing it. Because it matters. They keep trying to tell you that these things don't matter. The CIA today in a statement said none of this matters. We've already admitted it was likely a lab leak. But you didn't admit the rest of it. You didn't tell us what you found with Dr. Fauci, how many tentacles the leprechaun of the Potomac had extending into everything, how much he shifted the narrative, how much he punished people for trying to tell the truth. You've told us the bare minimum and nothing else. And we're supposed to take those few crumbs and say, thank you very much, sir. No. I know my language has been a little saltier than I've been trying to let it get lately, but this show has earned this language. So fuck all that. You have openly lied to the American people over and over and over again. And you have used your mid-level minions that we found out about at the beginning of this term for Donald Trump to do so. These people that had tags with their job descriptions that made them basically unfireable until Donald Trump said, no, we're not, no, they're gone. Trust me, they're not all gone because it takes longer than a year to clean out what's taken 100 years to get built up. And this is what I keep trying to tell you. One side is using your attention span against you to fundamentally transform this country and its government. The other side is using it against you to go every couple of years, well, give us a shot again, and we're actually going to do it, and then fundraise off of that. None of this was a quick process. A lot of the progressive subservience or subversiveness has been happening over the last 100+ years. And it's because of their consistency, because the Republicans continue to overestimate the electorate. And I don't mean that in the way that you're taking it, but it's just the truth of it, because this all started over 100 years ago when the Democrats got the progressive income tax back on the table. They wouldn't have the ability to fund all this shady crap if they weren't able to turn you over and shake your pockets at their leisure. But over 100 some odd years ago, everybody was like, well, the Democrats, I mean, and I've given this analogy before, but after the Civil War, the progressive income tax was sunset, as it was always intended to be sunset. And then every 2 years, a fresh crop of Democrats, along with whoever was a holdover from the previous Congress, would come back to the Republicans and say, remember how nice it was for us to be able to get all this stuff done when we had this progressive income tax? Wouldn't it be great if we did that again? And every 2 years they would do it, and they would do it, and they would do it. And over and over again, from the end of the Civil War until 1913, 1914, somewhere around in there, the Republicans kept saying no. And eventually they got tired of the bullshit. And they finally just looked at each other and said, well, surely the American people are not going to permanently let these people into their pockets. So we'll leave it up to the people. And then the Democrats started the message that they've always started, that they've run with ever since. It's only a 2% tax on the top 1% of America, so you're not even going to notice. You ever notice that's the same language they use every time they come back to you, supposedly with hat in hand, but they're actually using the hat to hide a mallet? Every time they start trying to beat you over the head with the idea of, you're not even going to notice this. It's not going to impact you. And it's been their message ever since. And for some reason, it keeps working. The mask is fully slipping off the Democrats, and we're definitely going to be talking about that more in hour 2, because there's some really crazy stuff coming out ever since this redistricting fight got started in earnest. And the Democrats have remember how many times they said, this is tyranny, this is a threat to democracy. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, trust me, they're the ones that not only do they understand what those words mean, but they understood if they kept shouting them at us long enough, half the country would believe them. When in reality, they're the ones willing to do whatever it takes, whenever it takes it, to get their point across and get their agenda passed. And it's time Republicans started trying to fight the same way. But that's part of what this proves. You cannot trust your government anymore. I don't care who it is. Because this is the point that I'm trying to get across. The scariest part about all of this was the CIA's response to this guy going to the Hill. Instead of saying, hey, now that we can tell you this is what happened, they said, well, we've already admitted this part, and that's all we're going to cop to. And this guy's not even a whistleblower, technically speaking. Technically speaking. And here's another little snippet that I think is important. Hang on a second. I'm fighting with my system. This is not a very long clip, but I want to play this part. I think this is actually still part of the opening statement, but I wanted to narrow this part down specifically.
But your conclusion is that changing from the scientific consensus of it being from a lab to a neutral position by the CIA was significantly influenced by Anthony Fauci?
It was significantly influenced by Anthony Fauci's injecting himself into the IC. And to go to the second part of your question about what happened, particularly during the 90-day study, we have documentation that shows that as of August 12th, the CIA was considering calling this a lab leak, August 12th of 2021. And then that changed on August 17th of 2021. Right. And unfortunately, because the CIA would not provide us documentation that we asked for, we have no idea why that changed. And that's
And they
sort
weren't
of essential.
alone, because we know the FBI was coming to the same conclusion that it was lab leak, as well as the FBI. But your conclusion is that changing from the scientific consensus of it being from a lab to a neutral position by the CIA was significantly influenced by Anthony Fauci?
It was.
Now, let me break down to you, or for you, why that was significant and why it was helmed by Anthony Fauci. Guess who controlled most of the purse strings for that funding? For the gain of function research that he swore wasn't happening. Let's remember, and again, I'm firing up the Wayback Machine for these last few minutes because I am not above victory laps when I've earned one. I'm going to say this again. Dr. Anthony Fauci was instrumental in the gain of function research that was happening in China because he was the one who changed the legal definition of gain of function research in the country and then moved it off-site and moved it out of the country. He did that. He did that. We've shown you the paper trail before. It's all there if you go look for it, or it was. I don't know if it still is, because I'm sure they've probably cleaned house a lot since then. But this is one of the points that I have made from the beginning. The man who was put in charge of cleaning up the mess was the one who covered it up. And that is one of the biggest mistakes of the Trump administration, because Dr. Anthony Fauci, despite what the Democrats have told you, has never been a good person. Anyone who is willing to experiment on pets, we're not even talking about actual lab animals, because scientists have to do that sometimes. Usually it's rats, sometimes it's primates, but they can separate themselves from that because reasons. This man was experimenting during the AIDS epidemic on beagles, on Snoopy, for God's sake. And y'all want to wrap him in the flag? Seriously? He was experimenting on Charlie Brown's dog during the AIDS epidemic. And I'm not trying to make it sound even worse, but I'm trying to drive the point home of what a monster that man would have to be, because I owned a beagle as a kid. I was upset it didn't look like Snoopy, but I owned a beagle as a kid, and it was one of the most lovable dogs I've ever owned. The only other dog that I loved more than that one was Jack. And Jack was just a mutt, but Jack used to follow me everywhere when I was a kid. I love that dog so much that in the 70s, I think is maybe one of the reasons why they have rules against this stuff now, but somehow my dad moved heaven and earth to have me take my dog into a photo studio, and I think it was either in Sears or JCPenney's, to have pictures taken with my dog. I still have those pictures. That's how much that mattered to me. And that's how willing my dad was to move heaven and earth to make sure that it happened. And it was something that I have never forgotten. But anyone who could do bad things to animals specifically, or even pets, that doesn't involve hunting for food, etc., is a monster. Because at least if you're hunting for food, there's a reason the animal has to die. The animal has to die so that you can live. Same can't necessarily be said when you're doing scientific experiments en masse to dogs, much less beagles. But this is something that we have been trying to tell you for now over 6 years, and every time we've tried, we've been silenced. I expect that to happen again today. I don't care anymore. And I already know it's happening because we were hitting almost 400 people last night. I have 50 people watching us right now. So I already know that the algorithms are kicking my ass. I don't care. I don't care if only one person hears it, because that person is going to be able to take this offline and say, hey, did you hear what happened on the Hill today? And did you hear that half the stuff that we knew is now being admitted to? Because people need to know how much. Look, I try not to use the word hate anymore, because that has become a whole other thing. But distrust, people need to understand how much you should distrust your government. Not to mention the fact that however much you distrust them, it's probably not enough. It's probably not enough. And that's why this has taken up almost the entire hour of the program, because that's how important this is. Nobody knew this was happening today. Even people on Fox were like, yeah, we didn't know this was happening. And then I'm like, okay, so you're telling me they didn't tell anybody, they didn't give out any advance notice that this was happening. But at the same time, this is also happening when Donald Trump is on his way to China and actually in China now for negotiations. Yeah, trust me, this is about to be used as a bargaining chip, because he now knows. I think even he suspected back then, but all the people that were in his ear were like, no, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. That's not what happened. And also, Dr. Fauci is probably one of the best people we have to handle this, which wasn't a lie on its face until you take into account that he did everything he could to distance himself from what he did to create the mess in the first place. If Dr. Anthony Fauci is not in handcuffs within the next 2 years, because trust me, it'll take them that long to make it happen, then I'm going to be pissed. It should have happened already. I'm going to be honest with you. It should have happened already. But now, knowing what we know, knowing that people are coming out and saying it, knowing that the Central Intelligence Agency is still pulling the meme, oh, nothing to see here, while there's stuff on fire behind them, tells me everything that I need to know. You cannot and do not distrust your government enough. And that's just the truth of it. And everything else that we're going to be talking about today tracks with that too. I was going to save this for the beginning of hour 2, but we might touch on it a little bit again. Did anybody notice that the second the Disney cruise story broke about the people that work for Disney Cruises using the cruises for trafficking, anybody notice how quickly another cruise ship story broke, and suddenly the hantavirus is a thing? And now NBC's at it again. They're trying to stir up the pandemic panic once again, because reasons. Did anybody notice how quickly that popped up, though? Wasn't on anybody's radar, not a single person's. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about Disney cruise ships being used for terrible things. Oh, well, let's let this story out now. Anyway, all right, so let's take a quick headline hit on the way out the door. Oh, so it looks like Bob Hoge finally put out a story about this. All right, so we're going to talk about this because it's just kind of a quick hit on the way out the door. This is another one from Bob Hoge over at Red State. So Swalwell's backstabbing former BFF. Yeah, now he's in trouble all his own. So we haven't seen or heard much from former California Rep Eric Swalwell, critter from California 14, since he abandoned his gubernatorial run and resigned from Congress in disgrace in April amid allegations of sexual abuse and rape. For a few days after the scandal broke, he holed up in the mansion of his buddy, billionaire Stephen Klubeck. Remember, me and Ross and Gene talked about that. But then lefty timeshare titan turned on him, kicked him out of his house, Will Smith and Uncle style, and demanded that he return $1 million in donations. However, and I wondered when the shoe was going to drop. I didn't mention it during Gene's show because it was just kind of one of those little tingly things on the back of my neck. But now it's Klubeck's turn to feel the heat as he was arrested in West Hollywood Tuesday and charged with a felony for attempting to prevent or dissuade a victim or a witness from testifying. Dun, dun, dun. West Hollywood deputies arrested Klubeck after he turned himself in following a warrant issued for his arrest. The California Post can and has confirmed he was released on a $300,000 bond. Seems kind of cheap for a billionaire. At 1:17 p.m. Tuesday after being held there since around 11 a.m. that day. The circumstances surrounding the charges are currently unclear, or where the warrant was issued out of is also unknown at the point. If convicted of the felony charge, Klubeck could face up to 4 years in prison. Klubeck was handcuffed and taken into custody by Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies in West Hollywood late Tuesday morning, and we've already touched on that part. His spokescritter quickly proclaimed his innocence, saying, "These charges are false, and we look forward to our day in court." Klubeck has an, shall we say, interesting history of his own, and was recently in a relationship with a former Penthouse pet, lucky bastard, who is accused of scheming to defraud wealthy men. Well, maybe not so lucky bastard. She's been charged with multiple felonies, including grand theft, burglary, and unauthorized use of personal identifying information. He also has bad taste in candidates. For a short time, Klubeck was among the crowded field running for state governor, but he bowed out in November, announcing on CNN that he was throwing his support, as girthy as it was, behind then Congress critter Eric Swalwell. It was the philanthropist's first ever political campaign, which he funded through a fortune amassed in real estate in a UC Berkeley poll co-sponsored by the Times last fall. Klubeck received less than half of 1% of support of registered voters, which probably means throwing his support behind Swalwell was kind of just a because there really wasn't much support to speak of. So, I'm going to say this again. Swalwell always seemed like a sleaze. But now he's got a really icky story to go along with that feeling of unease and sleaziness that he brings to the table. Because Lord knows, other than that, he brings nothing to the table. However, kind of seems like one of his buddies might be just about as bad. Interesting enough. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll get into this whole Hunta, whatever. I don't even know how to say it. The virus thing that's all the rage again now. We'll get into that on the other side of the break. My name is Rick Robinson. This is my show. Since we didn't take the music break in the beginning, we're going to take it now. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
They tried to quench the fire, drown it all in chains, tried to break our will and wash away our names. But every spark they buried only fed the flame. Now the cry of freedom's roaring through the rain. Hear the cry of freedom on the winds of change. Every voice united
Hello, friends. Do you have a moment so that we may discuss our Lord and Savior Minarchy? No, seriously, I'm just kidding. Hi, my name's Rick Robinson. I am the general manager of KLRNradio.com. We are probably the largest independent podcast network that you've never heard of. We have a little bit of everything, and by that, what I mean to tell you is we have news, pop culture, special events, conspiratainment, true crime, mental health shows, drama productions, and pretty much everything in between. So if you're looking for a new podcast home to grab a little bit of everything that you love all in one place, come check us out. You can find us on X under @KLRNradio. You can find us on our Rumble and our YouTube channels under the same names. You can also find us at KLRNradio.com and pretty much every podcast catcher known to man. So again, feel free to come check us out anytime you like at KLRN.
Celebrity designer Jeff Lewis is back with Hollywood House Lift.
I'm excited to be working with new clients.
I'm not getting rid of that.
I hope I never see you both again.
An all-new season.
Those have to go. That has to go.
From oh, wow,
It's been an actual nightmare.
to oh, wow.
This is such an upgrade.
With celebrities like Josh Duhamel, Christina Ricci, and Gina Rodriguez.
Dazzle me, Jeff.
It looks like Chuck E. Cheese.
Stream an all-new season of Hollywood House Lift with Jeff Lewis, now streaming on Freevee.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening.
In uncertain times, we could use someone to lean on. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma will stand by you with plan options to fit your budget. If you've recently lost your job, had a baby, or moved, you can still get the healthcare coverage you and your family need. Financial help may be available for those who qualify. Call 855-452-BLUE or visit hereforyouok.com to see if you're eligible to enroll. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma, a division of Healthcare Service Corporation, a mutual legal reserve company.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
The following program contains coarse language and adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
From red dirt roads to the Capitol steps, Rick's calling truth, no time for regrets. Fire in his voice, facts in his hand, talking sense to the heart of this land. It's the Rick Robinson Show where the truth rides high. No spin, no script, just an eagle in the sky. From D.C. to Tulsa, he's calling it out. Mic in his hand, yeah, he's got the clout. Heartland Radio, raw and real. Tune in, speak up, and feel what we feel. He's breaking down the noise, cutting through the lies, shining light where the shadow hides. With guests in the mix and callers on cue, he's a voice for the many, not the few. Well, grab your coffee, raise that flag, stand your ground, never wave that rag. News with a backbone, voice of the free. Rick's got the pulse of liberty. It's a Rick Robinson Show.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody?
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
Otherwise known as Chat Lives Matter Day, right here live on KLRMradio.com. Again, I am Rick Robinson, General Manager, KLRMradio.com, also General Manager, News Director of Digital Beacon US News, and I'll be back later tonight as well, starting with Inquiry at 7 p.m. Eastern, followed by Toxic Masculinity at 8 p.m. Eastern, followed by me taking second chair instead of third lately on Behind Enemy Lines Radio, hosted usually with Gene and Ross, but Ross is off tonight, so I'll be taking second chair, followed by Rick and Orty, 10 p.m. Eastern, and hopefully followed by Edge of Liberty. Sean is off today and is currently frantically trying to get his system put back together after a computer mishap, so we'll see what happens there. Anyway, let's get back into the program right about now. Sorry, I had to turn that bit up again for just a second. Anyway, so hopefully you're following the instructions at the bottom of the Chiron for the few of you that are finding us today. Yes, the algorithm hates us, and I had a feeling when I started talking about the topic that we talked about in hour one that it was going to be even worse than usual, and I wasn't too far off. So we're kind of joking about trying to take over the world. Now, the world of the media, maybe world in general, not so, no, not really. I don't want to be in charge of all that. It's a mess. Have you noticed? But yeah, if you're finding us for the first time, whether it be on Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, wherever, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button or the follow button, whichever option that you have available to you. And please, if you like what we're doing around here, tell your friends. Hell, even if you don't like what we're doing around here, tell your friends. Sometimes hate clicks are the best clicks. Anyway, so I told you guys when we got back from break, we were going to be changing tax at least a little bit, but it's only because the media is trying to do their craziness again. Because, yeah, so COVID's back in the news thanks to this CIA whistleblower on the Hill. However, it was already kind of trying to show back up in the news again because of the story that broke the other day about suddenly, as soon as Disney got thrown under the bus and like, hey, remember that when the news story broke that there were employees on the Disney cruise lines that were apparently involved in human trafficking? That seems a little sketch. But then all of a sudden this story broke. So here we go. So after a full hour on COVID accountability, what government knew, what agencies said, what they didn't say, and what Americans were told to stop asking. Let's talk about why that still matters right now, because while Congress is digging through the wreckage of the last pandemic narrative, parts of the media, looking at you, NBC, already seem to be warming up the next one. The hantavirus is real. The Andes strain can be dangerous. People have died in this outbreak. Nobody needs to pretend otherwise. But CDC says there are no confirmed U.S. cases tied to this outbreak yet. I wonder when that's going to change. The risk of the American public is extremely low, and the risk of a pandemic is also extremely low. That should, you would think, calm everyone down. Instead, some outlets appear to be reaching for the old pandemic panic button like it's muscle memory. Look, the disease may be rare, but the media instinct is apparently epidemic, and after COVID, that matters. Or I'm sorry, endemic. I don't know why I said epidemic. And after COVID, that matters because when institutions spend years using fear as a management tool, everybody should be paying attention because even real warnings sound like another sales pitch. And that's kind of where we are right now with this whole hantavirus thing. Look, I get it. It's scary. It's scary, but we're not doing this again. Look at the proximity. We are actually getting into the midterm cycle in earnest, and all of a sudden they're dusting off the pandemic playbook again. After they watched Democrats unsuccessfully try to not even follow the Constitution of the state they are supposed to represent. And that's the part of this that nobody's talking about either. They keep talking about how terrible it is and how black voters won't get any representation anymore because they're getting rid of all black districts. All the Supreme Court said was government segregation, no matter what the desired outcome might have been, is illegal and unconstitutional. We fought a war over that shit. But now the left is trying to spin it. Look, black people still get to vote for whoever the hell they want to vote for. Nobody's trying to take their vote away from them. If they were, I would be one of the first ones saying no. But they're not. And I'm going to say this again. One of the things that showed me exactly how bad this still is and how much it's a they problem was when you had a woman of color arguing in front of the Supreme Court representing the American Civil Liberties Union, stating that they need these specialized districts because white Democrats don't vote for black Democrats. I would be curious to find out how many black Democrats actually vote for white ones, but that doesn't change the fact that the racism call is coming from within their own house, but they keep projecting it outward, hoping that nobody notices. How many different times do we have to break this down? The whole Charlottesville thing was crazy, and it was Trump being taken out of context that made it this big thing that supposedly was what inspired President Joe Biden to run again, or to run and try to run for president again. Now we add in the SPLC angle and the fact that the guy that was responsible for throwing all that together was in a group chat with them. And it adds an entire different layer. But all of this ties together. I didn't intend it to be, but this is turning into one of those 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of shows, because this is what we're finding out. Government agencies will lie to you to push their narrative. Shocking absolutely no one. But what is shocking is when you find out the depths to which they are willing to go to push those narratives and to make them a thing. That should terrify each and every one of you, especially with what we're uncovering now. What we're uncovering now, I'm not even talking about the COVID stuff anymore. I'm talking about the other stuff. After this decision from SCOVA, the Supreme Court of Virginia, you had Democrats actively calling to lower the retirement age of the justices so that they could unseat most of them. Who is it that's acting tyrannical at this point? Because it's not Republicans. The funny thing is, as pissed off as I am about John Thune not doing his job, he's showing you how this is technically supposed to work without the receipts, which pisses me off, because if he had put it up for a vote and said, see, I tried, we couldn't make it happen. You know what? I'd throw my hands up in the air, but then I'd start reviewing who voted no and start pushing wherever those people are to have them unseated so that it could be fixed again in the future, potentially. That's why I want the receipts. But he's showing you how this is supposed to work. They get sent to Congress. They get sent to the Senate. Now, again, these people are supposed to be following the will of their constituency. And this is, again, supposedly anywhere from an 80-20 to an 85-15 issue. So how it is they don't have the votes, that's something that everybody's individual Senate folks should be having a talk with their senators for. Because if they're not following your vote or your voice, why are you sending them? But you can't, because nobody's willing to give you the receipts. But the Democrats don't even do that. When they don't get what they want, they break it until they fix it in their image again. That's what they started talking about doing with the whole Virginia Supreme Court thing. And that's not the only time. You had during Tennessee's redistricting hearings, you had Democratic folks in their legislature acting like total morons to the point where Tennessee has not only censured them, but removed them from their postings. Why do the big boy Republicans not act that way? That, again, should be a question you ask of your Congress critters and your senators. Because Democrats are allowed to show their ass all the time on Capitol Hill, and they do. They show their ass by not showing up. You know what? Once a meeting is called of a specific cabinet and those folks choose not to show up, then they should be unseated. Period. End of sentence. Full stop. Don't give a shit. Because then we get rid of the performative bullshit on both sides. Oh, I'm not going to this hearing because it's just a show. You know what? That should be the primary reason that you're there then. So that you can point out to your constituency what a farce this is. The fact that you choose not to show up tells me that you don't want to be on that committee anymore, and you should lose your seat. And I don't care if it's an R or a D. Because if you're not doing the job you got sent to Washington, D.C. to do, why the hell are you still there? And this is the point that I've been trying to make now for a long time on all of this. Every single bit of it. They are not doing their jobs over and over and over again, and yet we keep sending the same people back. Then you've got this whole thing with Massey. Massey is somebody, dude, I used to respect Thomas Massey. I was trying to jump through all kinds of hoops to get him to do my shows when I realized that he would just, go on to X Spaces that he was invited in. I really wanted him on my shows. Now I'm glad he never answered me. Because I don't recognize him anymore. And I don't just mean because of his glow up since his wife's death. I don't recognize him anymore because he's become one of those, I'm going to say all the right things and tell you what I'm going to do and then come back to you when I don't get them done and say, because I couldn't get these things done, it's not my fault. Give me some more money so I can get them done. He just put out a post the other day talking about how proud he was that so many outside of Kentucky donors were lining his coffers. Wasn't he just about a year or so ago, talking about how money being flooded in from outside states to influence elections was a bad thing? Because I remember, and I'm pretty sure Pepperidge Farms does too. But now that it's on his side, now that he's getting the money that he thinks he needs, it's going to be awesome. It's awesome because it's him. It's awesome because it's him. Bear with me a second. I thought maybe I didn't have that. There was a link going around of someone who's accusing him of some crazy, crazy stuff. Okay, anyway, sorry, I just realized I got tagged in something. I was trying to see what it was. You know what? That's actually not a very long clip. Speaking of behind the enemy lines, let's do a little bit of a promo, shall we? Why not? We can do those things. But yeah, so this is a clip from one of the recent Behind the Enemy Lines episodes, which I will be on tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time, all over the YouTubes and the X's and all the aboves. And now I out of habit, I clicked over to YouTube. All right, here we go.
For the naysayers that are saying, Trump is losing his grip and, the big tent is collapsing, there comes a time between, when you have to figure out, do we want the big tent or do we have to clean house every once in a while? And Trump is in the process of cleaning house and getting some vengeance. Like, who did we lose over the last few months in the big tent? I'll just rattle off a few names real quick. Thomas Massey, never votes for Republicans, who cares? Liz Cheney before that, who cares? MTG, fucking crazy. Candace Owens, even more crazy. Tucker Carlson, attacked by demons. And fucking Nick Fuentes, who now admits he's a Democrat. So you know what? I'm all for this, man. Vengeance, clean house, get rid of some of these rhinos, and let's go full steam ahead into the midterms and let the chips fall where they may.
All right, so there you have it.
For the naysayers that are saying...
All right, hang on. Having a technical issue in my ears. Straight from Ross's mouth, clean house and let chips fall where they may. You know what? I kind of agree with him. Look, I admit that even with all of the redistricting, this is still going to be a toss-up. But if we're not going to get people that do the things that we need them to do anyway, then maybe it's just time to let the grand experiment die. And I don't say that lightly. I say that because of stories that I'm now seeing out of New York City, where Mamdani the commie went back to Hoochie Cooch Hochul with his hat in hand and said, "Please, Mom, may I have 4 million more money so that I can clean up the mess that the last guy left, even though he's from the same party that you and I are part of." And then he touted it as getting rid of the deficit. You know, if I was able to go to my mom and say, "I need $250,000 to pay off all my bills," and then was able to go pay off all my bills and then took credit for it, that would make me a dick. Because I didn't pay for shit. Mom paid for it, or dad paid for it. That's exactly what's happening in New York City. The mayor went to the governor and said, "Hey, we're broke. We can't afford to pay for all the things that I want to pay for. Here's some more money." So again, now he's taking a victory lap. Bernie Sanders is adding to the victory lap, talking about how great it is that he has removed the deficit when even the language they use is wrong, because he has brought the deficit down. Deficits are negative numbers anyway. You have to bring it up to zero. And I know that's nitpicking, but it still pisses me off, especially when I can see that they're openly lying, because he basically, on the back of the rest of New York, took care of New York City's problems. On the back of me and you, because guess what? A lot of that money that Kathy Hoochie Cooch just handed out came from your tax return and mine. I don't live there. I shouldn't be responsible for cleaning up their messes. That is one of the things that I really wish would happen. You know, the easiest way to make sure that things actually start getting fixed is if we start putting everybody's tax money into certain buckets. Only the taxpayers of New York can be held responsible for paying for shit that happens in New York. Only the taxpayers of Oklahoma can be responsible for having to pay for things coming from federal money that require to be paid for in Oklahoma. It's one of the quickest ways to start actually holding people accountable and doing the things that need to happen, instead of having this ginormous bucket that we talked about in first hour that was put in place by none other than progressive Democrats, because it's the only way that they can get the funding for all the things that they want and need. Nice one. I see you getting past the censors. I'm going to fix it for you while I put it on the screen. So according to Andrew in the chat, and he wasn't able to use a specific word, if you capitalize it, it works because it's actually a name still. But Mamdani being a dick is not surprising, because he doesn't have one otherwise. Which is a true statement. All right, so I know I got on a bit of a sidetrack, but again, this is kind of that whole 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of thing, because if you don't distrust your government, why are you listening to me? Just saying. So remember that redistricting fight we were talking about? Get ready for more Democratic weeping and gnashing of teeth if it's not already happening. According to Red State, the Missouri Supreme Court issued unanimous rulings Tuesday that keep Missouri's 2025 congressional map in place for the 2026 midterms, rejecting both the compactness challenge and the argument that merely filing referendum petitions automatically suspended the law. So that actually checks out with local reporting. According to KMBC, they reported the Missouri Supreme Court upheld the new 2025 map and said challenges failed to prove it violated Missouri's compactness requirement. The court also held that simply submitting petitions didn't check all the boxes that automatically freeze the map before signatures are verified. So this brings us from public health panic to political panic, because once people learn that fear can move policy, they start using it everywhere. In Missouri, the argument was basically, we filed enough paperwork to challenge the map, therefore the law should freeze right now. And the Missouri Supreme Court said, yeah, not so fast, mister. You can like the map or hate the map. You can think it helps Republicans, hurts Democrats, slices Kansas City weird, or corrects an old imbalance. But courts are not supposed to ask, do I like this map? They're supposed to ask, did the legislature violate the Constitution, which is exactly what happened in Virginia, because they did, in fact, violate their own Constitution. And the scariest part about watching Democrats completely lose their shit about violating the Virginia Constitution is they're the reasons it was a violation of the Virginia Constitution. Because there are rules in Virginia about not being able to do things like this if an election is already underway. Guess why the election was already underway? Because Democrats want insanely long mail-in voting windows. So it's their own fault. It's their own fault. Missouri Supreme Court just gave us another reminder that courts are not supposed to be political map drawing commissions with robes. The new Missouri map is expected to lock in a 7 Republican, 1 Democrat congressional layout for 2026. I'm surprised the Republicans left them 1 at this point, but hey, Democrats and activists hate it. Republicans love it. The part that I'm saying is just because the maps got redrawn to favor Republicans, we're not taking anybody's right to vote away. So don't just assume that just because the map favors it, that all of a sudden everything's going to turn red, because that doesn't always work. I do know this, and it took me some research to figure it out, because one of the things that bugged me was watching CD5 in Oklahoma turn blue in the midterms of Donald Trump's first term, and I couldn't figure out how or why. And then I did some research. That was one of the last times that the was it the midterms? Maybe it was or I think it was Biden first term, because it was post COVID, but only barely. So CD5 turned blue. I believe it was in the 2020-2021 run up. And it took me forever to figure out why. That was because that was one of the last times that ballot harvesting was actually considered legal in Oklahoma. So you had a bunch of folks with D's behind their names going to nursing homes and everywhere else going, we will help you make sure you get to vote because of this hard time, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Funny thing is, she only lasted 2 years. And once the ballot harvesting went away, guess what stopped? But again, this goes back to everything that I'm talking about. If you don't distrust your government by now, why are you listening to me? Anyway, so again, the map is expected to lock in 7-to-1 ratio, but the court's job was not to decide whether the map made everybody feel warm and fuzzy and all represented and stuff. The court's job was to decide whether the map clearly violated the Missouri Constitution requirements for compact, contiguous, nearly equal districts, and the challenges did not, in point of fact, clear that bar. Then came the referendum argument. Activists basically said, we dropped off the petition, so the law should be suspended for right now. The court said, nah, not really. You do not freeze the law simply by delivering boxes that purport to contain signatures. Those signatures have to be verified. Otherwise, anybody with boxes, clipboards, and enough righteous indignation could suspend legislation before anybody knows whether the paperwork is valid. That's not democracy. That's government by FedEx. So, yeah. And that's the theme running through today's show, whether it's COVID, public health panic, intelligence agencies, vaccine records, or redistricting fights. The American people are tired of being told to trust outcomes, whether institutions play games with the process. Show the work. Looking at you again, John Thune. Follow the rules. Count the signatures. Release the records. Then we can argue like Americans. Loudly. Probably in some cases very badly, but at least on the same page with as much information as can be made available. I know it's a hard concept to think of. I've said this for years. Sunlight is and always has been the best disinfectant. Now, here's to this one, because this goes back to the same tie-in of you can't really trust the government well enough. So he just said the quiet part out loud in a clip that I just found. So I'm working on getting that up and ready to go. It's not a very long clip, but again, apparently it's a good bit of the quiet part out loud, because John Brennan suddenly weighing in on some stuff, interestingly. And here we go.
He has succeeded largely in turning DOJ and the FBI into political arms of his political operation. What still exists in the system to slow that down?
Well, I think, as Liz mentioned, there's still a legion of professionals in the law enforcement environment, the Department of Justice, as well as the CIA and other places, the ones who are refusing to follow politically motivated prosecutions, those who are refusing to support any type of political activities on the part of the Trump administration that are inconsistent with the authorities, the responsibilities of the intelligence community, law enforcement community, and Department of Justice.
He has succeeded largely
I'm going to play that part again. Hang on.
the FBI into political arms of his political operation. What still exists?
So first of all, got to call this out. Objection, facts not in evidence. He's not using it as a political prosecution arm. He's trying to find the truth. But here, even though he couches it really interestingly at the end, let's listen to the first few seconds of his response.
In the system to slow that down.
Well, I think, as Liz mentioned, there's still a legion of professionals in the law enforcement environment, the Department of Justice, as well as the CIA and other places.
There's still a legion of professionals. Sorry, I'm doing air quotes and realizing I don't think I have myself on camera. But yeah, so there's a legion of professionals, damn it. And it's all Trump's fault because there's legions of professionals. All right, so we're going to take a break. It's not a very long break, but I have to take a pause for the cause anyway. So music break again. My name's Rick Robinson. This is my show. Final segment on the way back. Stay tuned.
I've seen the fire in our nation's eyes when anger prowls for prey. I've heard good people draw their lines and call it holy rage. But the cross was never raised to bless the stones we throw. And if mercy leaves the house, there's something wrong down in the soul. Words ain't bullets, but they can hit the same. And once a heart turns cold enough, it forgets what grace is for. There's no room for hate in America tonight. No room in the home where the children need the light. No room in the heart where the Savior's supposed to stay. If Jesus owns the house, then hatred don't got no place. No room for hate. No, no room for hate. No room for hate. You can wave a flag above it. You can quote a verse or two. You can dress it up like justice till it almost sounds like truth. But outrage ain't righteous when it changes with the side. And you can't love your neighbor, treating them like they're downrange. We're all image bearers, breath of God and dust. And you don't heal a broken land by teaching it not to trust. There's no room for hate. In America tonight, no room in the home where the children need the light. No room in the heart where the Savior's supposed to stay. If Jesus owns the house, then hatred don't got no place. No room for hate. No room for hate. No room for hate. Drag it to the cross, lay it in the ground. Let the blood of Jesus turn the whole thing around. Truth can still be spoken, courage still can stand, but rage don't get to rule the soul of a faithful man. a house, then hatred don't got no place. Let revival start. Oh, where the anger breaks. Where the anger breaks. Let healing rise up. Oh, where the hurt gives way. No room for hate. No room for hate. No, no room for hate. No room for hate. Not in Jesus' name. Oh, not in this house. Not in this heart. Not in his name. No room for hate.
Hello, friends. Do you have a moment so that we may discuss our Lord and Savior Minarchy? No, seriously, I'm just kidding. Hi, my name's Rick Robinson. I am the general manager of KLRNradio.com. We are probably the largest independent podcast network that you've never heard of. We have a little bit of everything, and by that, what I mean to tell you is we have news, pop culture, special events, conspiratainment, true crime, mental health shows, drama productions, and pretty much everything in between. So if you're looking for a new podcast home to grab a little bit of everything that you love all in one place, come check us out. You can find us on X under @KLRNradio. You can find us on our Rumble and our YouTube channels under the same names. You can also find us at KLRNradio.com and pretty much every podcast catcher known to man. So again, feel free to come check us out anytime you like at KLR.
The following program contains coarse language and adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
All right, it's officially getting warm in the studio, so I decided to take the hat off for the last little bit of the show. Anyway, we're back. We're live. And no, Andrew, this is not because of your comments about my football team. It's just because it's getting a little toasty back here and I don't feel like turning the air on yet. Anyway, so we're back. We're live. It's Wednesday, otherwise known as Chat Lives Matter Day. Don't forget to come back tonight starting at 7 p.m. Eastern with Inquiry with Stephen L. Hall and probably another guest inquisitor because I don't think the squirrel is back from his hiatus. And then after that, we have Toxic Masculinity, our once a month foray into everything the media tells you should hate about being a dude. Then we have Behind Enemy Lines Radio, usually hosted by Gene and Ross, and I usually have been filling in lately as a third participant. However, Ross is apparently out for the night, so it'll be me and Gene. And then after that, we have Rick and Orty. And then after that, we should hopefully have Edge of Liberty. So I'll be working again until about midnight or so tonight. Hopefully you guys will join us and have some fun in the process. And also, because I keep forgetting to announce this, the feed will not be going dark at 1 Eastern-ish. The vice president will be giving one of his first ever fraud updates now that he's basically been put in charge of all the fraud stuff. So we're going to carry that for as long as it runs. So yes, extra work today. And honestly, if I'd have known about the hearing, because I didn't, we probably would have been carrying a lot of that today too, for reasons. But anyway, so back to what we've been talking about though. So let's talk about this fraud stuff a little bit before the vice president says what he's going to say about it. Because, the things are suddenly getting accomplished. It's kind of weird when you think about it, because for the first few months of the Trump administration, it's like everything was focusing in one direction or the other, and it didn't seem like a lot of the things that we were wanting to happen were happening. However, suddenly it seems like things are starting to change a bit, and it's interesting because J.D. Vance has apparently uncovered billions of dollars of fraud again. Trying to find the story. I don't remember which side it was on. Where did it go? I thought it was on Town Hall, but anyway, maybe it was Red State. I could have sworn it was Town Hall, but There's been lots of news breaking today, so things are getting buried. Hang on. Okay, so we talked about that. Huh. Oh, there it is. Big, beautiful new win. Yeah, love how they keep working that in. This is from Ward Clark over at Red State. The Vance Fraud Task Force has halted $1.4 billion in hospice fraud, so I'm sure this will probably get talked about today. This is one of those, yes, this is what we voted for moments, which for some of us have been few and far between. Vice President J.D. Vance's task force has now withheld $1.4 billion, and again, billion with a B, in taxpayer money that was being sought allegedly through fraud. That's billion, again, with a B, followed by alien. Sorry, I had to actually steal Ward Clark's line there, so I want to give credit because I've never thought about doing. Dude, I may start doing that in more of my articles. That was pretty cool. So here is the full report, and I'm sure this will be something that he talks about today. Vice President J.D. Vance's anti-fraud task force has withheld $1.4 billion in federal funding from home health and hospice. Am I the only one ever since Austin Powers who says billion that way like all the time? I can't help it anymore. And hospice providers nationwide following a wave of suspensions enacted by the anti-fraud task force targeting operations in none other than commie failure, along with Minnesota and several other states. Approximately 90% of these suspended providers have not reached out to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, otherwise known as CMS, the agency tasked with combating fraud, waste, and abuse since payments have been suspended. Trump administration officials told Fox News Digital that they believe a lack of communication between alleged fraudulent providers and CMS indicates that the providers were actually not legitimate enterprises. Not legitimate, you say. President Trump has made the eradication of systemic fraud a cornerstone of his administration's domestic policy. On Monday, CMS Administrator Dr. Mehmet Oz blasted California officials over the state's hospice crisis, charging that the fraud is stealing your lives and pointing to a sophisticated web of international graft. We've got Russian government involvement, surprising pretty much no one, that we believe is happening in Los Angeles. We've got the Chinese government involved. Remember that mayor who just had to step down? Kind of wondering why she's not facing treason charges. In a big fraud ring in New York, Oz told guest host Kayleigh McEnany on the Jesse Waters primetime show. And of course, the Cuban connection, pointed out to me by former Miami Mayor Francis Suarez. We've got twice as many durable medical equipment suppliers selling wheelchairs and other things, like canes, as there are McDonald's in South Florida. The owners often flee back to Cuba with the money the moment we move in on them. And why wouldn't they? Back to the report, though. In April, the head of a California hospice advocacy group warned congressional lawmakers that industry fraud is flourishing across the state, surprising almost no one willing to look. Sheila Clark, president and CEO of the California Hospice and Palliative Care, I changed California to California. These ghost providers managed to evade regulators for so long. You'd be amazed, and I quote, how many hospices you can walk up to the door in California and there's nobody there. You can see 5 months worth of mail stacked up. Asked a survey. How exactly did that happen? How do you put a hospice in a burrito stand? That's got to be one of my most interesting stories, and I haven't really talked about it yet. They actually put a hospice care center in a burrito stand. How do you put hospice in a retail store? How do you have over 100 hospice, corporations, leadership groups, whatever you want to call them, in the same single-story private domicile? And yet somehow nobody noticed. It's not that they didn't notice. It's that they don't care. It's federal government money. These people despise the federal government. It doesn't matter who's in charge of it. They despise it. And as a matter of fact, the only reason they want Democrats in charge more often is because it makes it easier to do this kind of crap, because the leadership on the Democratic side doesn't care either. They want this government to fail. It's one of the things that they have been pushing for. They have been part of this whole idea that we have to be knocked down a few pegs so that it can fall apart and they can swoop in and put it back together in their own image. It started with the best of intentions on the other side of the aisle after World War II. We had this crazy idea that we could take third world countries and boost them into second world status, and eventually take all the second world countries that we boosted in from third world into first world. And then we could all come together and figure out central government, make sure one world government, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Then they realized that wasn't ever really going to work, because despite what the humanists and everyone tells you, people at their core are not usually good people. They hide it well. They dress it up. They try to make, well, I'm a philanthropist. No, you're not. You pretend you are. And I'm not saying this about every single person, but if the amount of fraud that we have found now that we're looking for it and we've only scratched the surface doesn't tell you everything that we as Christians have been trying to tell you since the dawn of time, the birth, the life and the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, if that doesn't drive this home for you, I don't know what will. Like it or not, there is institutional sin that became a part of our life as soon as Adam and Eve disobeyed God. It wasn't so much the fruit that they ate, it was the fact that he said, don't do it, and they did it anyway. That changed everything about us on a fundamental level. And then it gave us knowledge we were never really supposed to have, which you can say is either a good or a bad thing. I don't really know. As a child, I always thought it was weird that it seemed like God wanted to keep us stupid. But then I see all the people that a lot of people make fun of who don't really understand how the world works. And they always have this giant smile on their face, and they're happy all the time, and they're in a good mood all the time because they don't have to worry about all the crap that you and I have to worry about. And I'm like, maybe he was onto something. But I don't really know, because I wasn't alive. And yes, as a child and as a teenager, the fact that we were being punished for something that happened thousands of years ago, if you believe what was spun up in the Bible, I personally still believe that we have no idea how long a day would be to an entity that lives outside of the time-space continuum. So I think we've gotten some of that wrong. And I'll be the first one to tell you that. Because not everything can be true at the same time. I'm just saying. But this is the thing. We're now finding, because we're looking for it, and we've barely scratched the surface of it, all the people that are willing to steal from me and you to get what they want. Some of them are Americans. Most of them are not. But the Democrats have been turning a blind eye to it. You know how I know Democrats have been turning a blind eye to it? And even some Republicans? How long have Democrats had supermajorities in the legislature in California? How long has there been a Democratic governor in California? And before you point out the governor, I barely considered him a Republican anyway. Just saying. So the problem is that we've seen these kind of things exposed over and over and over again by independent journalists, by local activists, and now by the vice president's task force. But it is likely the fraudsters busted to date are the very tip of the iceberg that we've been discussing. CMS estimates for 2025 alone put the amount of improper payment by Medicare at around $56.7 billion. And for Medicaid, the number is about $37.9 billion. Again, that's the letter B followed by an illion. That's $94 billion in taxpayer money improperly paid, most of it almost certainly to fraudsters. And from what the Trump administration is telling us, a lot of that money has already been taken offshore to places like Cuba or Russia. In other words, these fraudsters are stealing from the American taxpayers to fund our nation's adversaries. So the new crackdown is great, but let's see what they're actually going to do with it. Because I'm sorry, if a foreign government is committing fraud within our borders, that to me should be considered espionage and they should be treated accordingly, including being able to use whatever clawback mechanisms we have because we can declare it acts of terrorism. Look, as much as I hate the Patriot Act, it made so many things a lot more simpler than they really should be, including this. So I don't understand why we aren't using it now that we're finding out that, from Somalia to Cuba to Russia and pretty much everywhere in between, a lot of our money has been sent there. Guess what? Those governments can and should be held accountable for the actions of their citizenry. Sorry, just the truth of it. Just the truth of it, especially with as bad as this is getting. It would be one thing if it was, $10 here, $10 there, but we're talking about billions and billions of dollars. It's just insane to me. All right, so we got to talk about this on the way out the door. This is from Ward Clark. Princess Murkowski is back in the news again. This time she joined Republican Susan Collins, if you can call her that, and Rand Paul. As much as I was proud of him for what he did today, this still pisses me off, in voting for a resolution to force President Trump to pull out our armed forces, who are still poised, locked, loaded, and aimed at Iran. The good news is that the resolution still failed. Republicans' support for President Donald Trump's war on Iran fractured on Wednesday. Senate Democrats have tried to splinter off Republicans from the near unified backing of Operation Epic Fury for months, with a campaign of attrition putting war power resolution after war power resolution on the floor ever since fighting began. And after 2 months of trying, they finally got some in the GOP to flip on Trump, with Senator Jeff Merkley's Democrat Oregon latest attempt. Still, it wasn't enough to terminate ongoing operations in the Middle East. The resolution failed in part because of the Democrats' last sane Senator John Fetterman. Dude, again, I almost want to apologize for ever calling this man Uncle Festerman. Almost. And he voted against the War Powers resolution. And again, I think he's figured out that they're done with him. So now he's just, fuck you guys. I'm still here and I'm going to make your life a living hell while I am. Which couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of Democrats. Just saying. The administration is insisting that the ceasefire is in effect, a reset button on the conflict's 60-day window. And I honestly think this is why Trump has been pushing this peace thing so hard. And I know a lot of us, even me, have been like, okay, I think you've given it enough time. And I get it. He's a deal maker. And he always wants to try to figure out a way to make a deal. It's how he's managed to do a lot of the peace talks that he's done. I mean, let's face it. The biggest war that he thought was going to be easy to make go away has been the one with Russia and Kiev, because I'm sorry, I'm never going to call it Kiev. There's a reason we've always called it Chicken Kiev, and I'm standing by that. I don't care if you're missing. I don't care. I don't care because it's annoying, and I hate the well actually crowd. I got that earlier today. I actually put out a post when I saw this hearing that was about to pop off was popping off. This could be a good time to remind everybody that the cover-up's usually worse than, or always always worse than the crime. And I got a well actually in one of the chats that I work in, and I just left it alone because here's the thing. And this is why I stand by that statement. If you have to start the process to cover something up, even if it was supposedly unintentional, that gives you malice afterthought, because now you are going out of your way to hide things, especially if it was an accident, which is fucking stupid. So that makes everything that you're doing from that point forward premeditated, because you're taking the time to think about how to hide shit. So yes, the cover-up is always worse than the crime. And in many cases, it actually extends the statute of limitations once they figure out that you've been going out of your way to hide things. But anyway. So the truth of it is, the truth was doomed. The truce was doomed to fail from the beginning because, unfortunately, the Iranian leadership, whoever they may be, because we still don't know, is still feeling really, really froggy. Which, to steal a phrase from Eminem, means it's time to knock their dick in the dirt. They keep asking for it. Anyway, so Democrats are showing their usual failure to understand, well, basic reality. Senator Jeff Merkley, for a Democrat from Oregon, the Democratic sponsor of the resolution, said the military operation against Iran, Epic Fury, should be renamed Epic Failure. Really? We've decimated most of their military. They really have no navy to speak of anymore, unless you count these fast boats, which apparently, using F-18s and lasers, we've been nuking. Not literally, but close enough. We have, in this situation, no access to the highly enriched uranium. We have strengthened the Iranian hardliners. We have weakened the reformers. We have damaged our relationship with our allies. He said all of this before the vote. I'm going to say this again. If your idea of having allies is you were fine with the fine print from the Obama deal, which would have allowed Iran to actually have a nuclear weapon sometime this year, then you weren't paying attention to everything that Donald Trump has been saying since he got elected and before, for decades. This has always been a hard red line for him. Crazy people that are religious zealots cannot and should not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, especially when to bring about their version of the end of times, you have to bathe the world in blood. What easier way to do that? What easier way to do that? And for all of you that are screaming about how most of the Muslims are peaceful, guess who's at the head of all the non-peaceful Muslims? These folks. These folks. Everything that's happened in Israel, these folks have had their hand in it. Even 9/11, to a degree, these folks had their hand in it. This should have been our target all along. And I'm going to say this again. This should have been dealt with on January 22nd, 1981. It wasn't. So now somebody's dealing with it. It's not his fault that several administrations have let this go, have let this get worse, have tried to appease them. It's one of the reasons why I'm not happy that he keeps saying, if we don't get this by this time, it's on again, and then nothing happens. That's been my only detraction of most of this. As somebody who has raised children, you can't do that when you're dealing with tyrants, pint-sized or otherwise. You set lines and then not follow through. But what are you going to do? All right, so I told you guys we were going to get out of here. I'm not shutting the feed down, though, because I'm going to try to catch the Vance stuff, which should actually be starting right about now anyway. So let me get that set up and ready to go. I'm going to let this play for a second while I'm figuring stuff out. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Press conference coming up next, and then don't forget to come back tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the beginning of Chat Lives Matter Night. Want to thank those of you who took the time to hang out, chat, share the feed, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. You are the only reason and the only way we sometimes get past these crazy-ass algorithms. My name's Rick Robinson. This has been my show. Back later tonight.
From red dirt roads to the Capitol steps, Rick's calling truth, no time for regrets. Fire in his voice, facts in his hand, talking sense to the heart of this land. It's the Rick Robinson Show, where the truth rises high. No spin, no script, just an eagle in the sky. From D.C. to Tulsa, he's calling it out. Mic in his hand, yeah, he's got the clout. And radio, raw and real, and feel what we feel. He's breaking down the noise, cutting through the lies, shining light where the shadow gets in the mix and callers on cue. He's a voice for the many, not the few. We'll grab your call. Raise that flag, stand your ground, never wave that rag. and showboat unafraid. Truth bombs drop in a red state parade. From the plains to the power, he's speaking it loud with a mic and a mission that makes us proud. Talk for the people, talk that's real. The Rick Robinson Show, where we say what we feel.
All right. Well, I was going to pull it from C-SPAN, but I can't find the link anymore. So I went and found it on the whitehouse.gov YouTube channel. I don't know when it's going to start. I'm going to leave it live and then go pay attention to it elsewhere. So feel free to hang out and watch if you want when it starts. And if not, just still doing my job anyway. All right. Sorry. I'm a little discombobulated because reasons. Let me get the digital beacon feed spun up, though. I can at least change the title on that one before I spin it up because it hasn't gone live yet. I think it'll let me anyway. I guess we'll find out in a second. What did that say? I was getting something. What that was, though. Oh, see, they pulled monetization because of the topic today on YouTube. Not that it matters because I don't get enough hits off YouTube yet to do anything with it anyway, but still, that's annoying. Huh. Doesn't look like, nope, wait, sending info. Sorry, I know I'm talking over this, but it's not doing anything right now anyway. And now streaming. So let's see if, since I hadn't started that feed yet, did it let me change the title? Or is it going to run the other one? Sorry, we're doing some checking things out while we're on the process. Hey, it actually worked. Cool. All right. All right. So I'm stepping away now. This should be starting any moment now. And wait, I guess something. Oh, it went crazy because I had to pull the title. I was like, what is going on here? All right. All right. Just waiting on it to start. So here you go.
Good afternoon, everybody. How we doing? Good. Good to see you all. So as you know, the president just landed in China a few hours ago. I always, you may know that because of Secret Service protocols that I don't travel outside of the country with the President of the United States. So on days today, I sometimes feel like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone. I walk into the White House and it's very quiet and no one's there, and it takes me a second to realize exactly what's going on. But we've got a very big announcement today, actually a number of big announcements, and looking forward to hearing from Andrew and Dr. Oz and Kim about that. But let me just say that we've been hard at work over the last several months trying to make sure that we take care of the people's money and trying to make sure that the services that exist for the betterment of our fellow citizens, whether they're low-income kids who need access to food resources, whether they're low-income families who need access to medical benefits, that those programs are protected for the people who actually need them, that they don't exist to enrich fraudsters, but they exist for the American people for whom Congress has said they're entitled. And that's exactly what this fraud task force is about. One of the things that I thought going into it, but that I've learned about fraud, is that it always has two fundamental victims. The first victim is the American taxpayer, who is generously paid into these programs in an effort to give their fellow citizens a leg up. But it also has as its victims the people who are meant to benefit from these programs, who are not able to benefit, or maybe are benefiting less because of what a disaster some of the fraud has wrought in these programs. And let me just give you a few concrete examples of what we're worried about, of what we're targeting, and also what we're going to do to solve some of these problems. So first, we're announcing that the federal government is deferring $1.3 billion in Medicaid reimbursements from the state of California. And the simple reason is because the state of California has not taken fraud very seriously, and because of that, we see a lot of the consequences that I just referenced. And again, let me highlight the fact that this really is two separate victims. So there are California taxpayers and American taxpayers who are being defrauded because California isn't taking its program seriously. But also you have people who've been prescribed medications that they don't even need. Sometimes they've had drugs put into their bodies that they don't need because fraudsters have actually encouraged false prescriptions and false administration of medications. So think about this. You're just a person trying to go see a doctor. You assume that your doctor is doing the right thing, but these fraudulent healthcare providers are getting rich by giving people medications they don't even need. It's a defrauding of the American taxpayer, but it's a violation of the trust that should exist between every American and the people who prescribe the medications. That's one thing that we're targeting, and this is why we're taking this action, is because we want California to get serious about this fraud. The second thing I want to talk about, and it requires a little bit of background explanation, is that we are going to very aggressively encourage the states to take Medicare fraud more seriously. So I think a lot of you understand, but for those of you watching at home who don't appreciate this, the Medicaid system that exists in the United States is really 50 separate systems. The federal government pays most of the Medicaid money, but then each of the individual states actually administers the Medicaid program. Now, we have red states and blue states that go after fraud aggressively, but we also unfortunately have some states, mostly blue states unfortunately, that do not take Medicaid fraud very seriously. So you have what's called Medicaid Fraud Control Units, or MFCUs. These Medicaid fraud, these anti-fraud units within the Medicaid program, we generously, meaning the federal government generously gives these fraud control units many, many billions of dollars across the United States of America so that they can take Medicaid fraud seriously. But let me just give you an example to highlight how absurd some of these Medicaid fraud programs are, because they're not actually being used at all. This is a tool. This is a tool that we want the states to use, but unfortunately, a lot of states aren't using these tools at all. Let me highlight this with just a couple of separate statistics. So, the Hawaii Medicaid program has received billions and billions of dollars from the federal taxpayers. And of course, Hawaii taxpayers have paid in a lot of money into this program over the last years as well. Guess how many convictions or indictments has Hawaii had over the last few years in its Medicaid fraud program? The answer is 0. Not a single indictment, not a single conviction, because the administrators of the Hawaii program just don't take it seriously. They don't think that fraud is a big enough problem. They don't care about protecting resources. They don't care about protecting that Medicaid program. So what does that mean? That means that if you're committing fraud in Medicaid in Hawaii, at least up until now, hopefully now they're going to take it seriously, you have had effectively free reign from the government of Hawaii to commit as much fraud as you want. That is a complete disgrace. In New York, which does a little bit better, but not by much, New York has had 9 indictments over the last year. 9 indictments. That's a $100 billion Medicaid program just in New York, and you've had 9 indictments. Indiana, which has about a third of the population of the state of New York, has had more than 4 times as many indictments over the same period. So does anybody here seriously think that the good people of Indiana are 12 times more likely to commit fraud than the people of New York? No, of course not. That's absurd. What is happening is that the leadership in New York are just not taking the fraud issue seriously. They're not using these anti-fraud control units to actually investigate and indict the fraud. So what are we going to do to fix that? Today, we are sending across 50 Medicaid programs, we are sending letters that will require them to show that they are effectively and aggressively prosecuting Medicaid fraud in their states. And if they do not aggressively prosecute Medicaid fraud, we are going to turn off the money that goes to these anti-fraud units. And I would say a couple things about this. You may think, obviously, this is a Republican administration. We're all proud Republicans up here. You may think that this is purely a red state or blue state issue. That's actually not true. We see Medicaid fraud issues in Ohio, the state that I used to represent in the United States Senate. We also see Medicaid fraud issues in a state like Maryland, which is obviously a very blue state. But both Ohio and Maryland have worked with us to take this issue seriously. They've worked with the guys behind me. They've worked with our entire team to make sure that they take fraud seriously. Again, this does not have to be a red state or a blue state issue. This is just basic good government. However, states like California, states like Hawaii, states like New York have completely not taken the fraud issue seriously in the Medicaid program. And so for those states that refuse to get serious about fraud, we are going to turn off that anti-fraud money. And if we continue to find problems, we can turn off other resources within their state Medicaid programs as well. Our goal here is not to do that. We don't want to turn off any money. What we want to do is ensure that people are taking fraud seriously. We want to protect Medicaid. We want to protect Medicare. But we can't do that if the states that are administering those programs are allowing those programs to be fleeced by fraudsters. So we encourage, whether it's California or New York or Maryland or Ohio, we encourage people to work with us. We want to help you use technology and other tools to get rid of the fraud, to get to the root of the fraud. We want to help you. But we can only help these state programs if those state programs are willing to help themselves. So these letters are the first step, the first effort to try to force these states to get serious about prosecuting fraud, and that's exactly what we're doing. Let me just talk about one final issue here. We see a lot of fraud in the home health care and in the hospice care system. I think Dr. Oz will probably talk a little bit more about that, but again, you have to appreciate that this fraud issue is fundamentally theft from the taxpayer, but also theft from people who need these programs. Just last month, a California psychotherapist, a woman who had spent 40 years treating patients, helping people deal with problems, found out that her Medicare program had been turned off, that she did not have access to the resources that she had been paying into for her entire life. Why? Because a fraudster had stolen her identity and signed her up for health care services that she didn't need, and so she had been turned off of the health care services that she did need. This happens way too much in the United States of America, and it happens because until recently, we did not have a government or an administration that actually took the fraud program and took anti-fraud prevention seriously. So let me just close with one final observation here. First of all, why are we doing this now? Why weren't we doing this 2 years ago? And the simple answer is because we didn't have a president and we didn't have an administration who took fraud seriously. So I want to thank the President of the United States, though I know he's busy in China. All of these efforts, all of these things that we're finding are because we have a president who has told us, take the fraud issue seriously, get to the root of it, and turn off the money when we find out that money is going to fraudsters. So that's exactly what we're doing. But I just want to say that for me, and I think for a lot of people who are involved in this effort, this is very personal. Because I'm not just the Vice President of the United States. I come from a family, and I grew up in a family where we sometimes benefited from these programs. The generosity of the American people is one of the most amazing things about our country. I think all of us, of course, just passed tax day. None of us like paying our taxes, but we do it. And why do we do it? Because we know that it goes to give a bite to a low-income family that can't afford food. We know that it goes to pay the military who keep us safe. We know that it goes to some essential services. But that trust in our government, that trust in our institution, it depends on us taking that trust seriously. How long are people going to pay into programs if they know that that money doesn't go to a low-income kid who needs health care, but that money goes into a fraudster getting rich? This doesn't work, and this doesn't make sense unless we take fraud seriously. So I'm proud to be part of an effort in our government. I'm proud to lead the effort in our government to finally take fraud seriously. We want to protect these programs for the kids and the families who need them. We want to ensure that the American taxpayer isn't getting fleeced. And I'd say just a few months into it, gentlemen, we have done a very, very good job. Let's keep it up. So let me turn it over now to Andrew Ferguson, who's the Executive Director of our Anti-Fraud Task Force. Andrew has done an amazing job, but I have to give a special shout out, not just because she's my fellow Ohioan, to Kim, who has probably found more fraud and has saved the American taxpayer more money than any single official within the government over the last 3 months. Kim, you have been an all-star. We're proud to have you on the team. Thank you, guys.
Well, I couldn't have put it better than the Vice President did. The only reason that what happened today happened is because President Donald Trump took this issue seriously that has plagued this country for decades and is committed to an all-of-government approach. And so to him is to who the credit goes. But the Vice President deserves tremendous credit here. It's hard to get the whole machinery of government moving. You need someone with the Vice President's abilities, with his gravitas, and with his determination to drive at these issues. That's the other reason we're here today. And while I'm at it, I want to thank Dr. Oz and Kim Brandt. A lot of the fraud problems are at HHS, and these two have committed countless hours, night and day, their staffs, their resources, to getting at these problems and fixing it. And where the states are unwilling to do their jobs and fix these problems, Dr. Oz and Kim have stepped up to take care of it. He's not up here today, but I want to thank March Bell as well. He's the Inspector General of HHS. A lot of the work we're going to have to do to get the states back in line and stopping fraud is going to go through March's office. You'll see his signature on the letter that went to the state Medicaid control units today. There's going to be a lot of work happening in the IG's office, and we're really pleased to partner with him. It's a shame we have to be up here at all, and with all due respect to the press, with this room full of reporters. It should not have taken a brave kid with a cell phone camera to point the American people at this issue. This is the result of decades of corruption, particularly in blue states like Hawaii, like the Vice President was just explaining, California, Minnesota, and New York, that have taken tens of billions of dollars to pay lawyers to go after Medicaid fraud that just simply have not done it at all. That's the whole point of these programs. If we have these cooperative federalism programs, we love federalism, we want to partner with states, we love subsidiarity, but if the states are going to participate in this, they have to protect their own citizens when they get access to these dollars. And not only are these dollars supposed to go to fight Medicaid fraud, I want to shine a light on the real human dimension of the complete negligence and malfeasance of some of these states here. One of the things they are obliged by law to do is stop elder abuse. That is one of the express commands that Medicaid fraud control units are given, is you are supposed to police Medicaid abuse and elder abuse in the Medicare system too, where so many of America's elderly citizens receive care. And so when the states just take this money and turn it into a jobs program for blue state lawyers, they are effectively participating in the elder abuse in those states, because the American people turned over their money to these state programs to protect their parents and their grandparents from elder abuse. And if you aren't doing it, you are effectively participating in that process. The Vice President highlighted this problem that we have in Medicaid, which is if a fraudster takes your identity, signs you up for benefits, when you go to try to get the actual benefits you need, you can be denied them. This is a problem we have found all over the federal government in benefits programs. I mean, imagine, we have examples of this. A mother on SNAP benefits going to the grocery store and trying to scan her EBT card to get groceries for her children, and some gang somewhere in California took her identity, maxed out her EBT card, and so her children are going to go hungry because of fraud that no one in the states is policing. And that is why what we are doing today is so important. The states should be our partners with this. We want to partner with the states, but what we aren't going to do as stewards of the American taxpayer dollar is to send those dollars, billions of them, to the states to line the pockets of state attorneys general who don't want to participate in protecting our benefits programs so that the people who really need them, the people that the American people have agreed to part with their hard-earned dollars to help, to defend, to protect, and to get through hard times, actually get the money. And if the states don't want to cooperate, for the first time, HHS, the Fraud Task Force, the Vice President, and the rest of the federal government are going to tell you, cooperate or lose your funds, and we will do the job for you. Because at the end of the day, if the states won't protect American citizens, the President of the United States and the Vice President will. And that is why I am so honored to be able to participate in this process, because this is ultimately about making sure not only that we aren't stolen from as taxpayers, but the American people who are entitled to this. For Medicaid and for Medicare, people who have paid into these programs their entire lives actually get the benefits that they are entitled to. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Oz to talk about all of the efforts at HHS.
Thank you, Andrew. Mr. Vice President, thank you for the leadership, the spirited desire to harness a group of stallions. They're back there, by the way, if you want to see the men and women who are leading the task force. They're at the back of the room, but they've done all the work that allowed us to come up here. In February, we had the largest anti-fraud announcement from CMS the day after the State of the Union address, in which the President created this task force and appointed the Vice President to lead it. Today's effort is larger. It's much larger. And there's a reason for that. Half of the fraud, we believe, in the federal government could be coming out of healthcare services. We're a large rhino that can be stabbed effortlessly by foreign governments, like syndicated criminal entities, and smaller time operators who can take advantage of the system with, as Andrew pointed out, as little as a Medicare beneficiary number, which is basically a credit card, to defraud this system. Unfortunately, that results in about $100 billion of estimated theft just from Medicare and Medicaid. That, just to put it in the context of affordability, which is a very important subtext of this discussion, we would be able to double the life expectancy of the Medicare Trust Fund if we could deal with the fraud issues just in Medicare. So anyone who's out there working their tail off, hoping Medicare will be there with them and for them, and we know many young Americans don't think that's going to be the case, it will be the case. If we take the fraud out, it'll be there for you and your children as well. And stopping this as a means of extending the Medicare Trust Fund is a noble purpose, but as has been pointed out by the Vice President and Mr. Ferguson, it is about the human costs. Because if these fraudsters are willing to take your money, they will definitely steal your life and take your health along the way. So let's transition to the 5 major actions. I'm going to go through them in order. I'll share them with Kim, who her nickname is Killer Kim. Mr. Vice President, you'll learn why in a second. She is unstoppable, and you want federal employees like Kim out there like bulldogs going after this fraud. It's right there for us to find. If we have partnership with the states, it'll help a lot. First,
we need a better nickname for her if she's going to work in healthcare.
She's a Buckeye. She's a Buckeye, so I gave her a choice. Is that a typical name in Ohio?
I don't, not that
Okay. California Medicaid deferral that the Vice President mentioned is $1.34 billion. Their submissions of Medicare records in the backup estimates are generating major red flags for us. And we have looked carefully at these records. We are allowed to audit, looking back for a quarter. Dan Brillman, Capri-Snap, who lead the Medicaid program, spearheaded this effort with a great team. We've discovered $630 million in billing from the folks who are egregiously the top 5% of outliers in billing. This is numbers so big you can't imagine anyone billing for these numbers of patients and that much for each patient. And so we're asking California to clarify for us how it got there. Second big area of observation is when you bill within a state, you should be comparable to the states around you. But in California, that's not been the case. In California, the growth of spending in personal care services, in-home services, is twice the rate of the average of the rest of the country. Let me say that again. The rest of the country is at one number. California is twice that number in its growth rate. We estimate there's $500 million that could be at risk, taken from federal taxpayers. That means people in New Mexico, which is a blue state, are paying extra taxes so that California can get away with something that they can't defend. So there's $500 million there we're going to defer to. They can show us more convincingly why that's the case. And there's another $200 million that we're stopping in questionable expenditures. Much of that is linked to immigration-related costs. You know, folks who are undocumented, and we're not sure why we're paying for this. And as you know from the Working Families Tax Cut legislation, which I'm going to emphasize is a program that saved Medicaid. The President and Congress saved Medicaid with that bill. That became legislation. There's another $200 million at risk there. Added together, $1.34 billion. It's the largest deferral we've ever made. We're making it for a good reason. We'd like the state to at least come to the table and explain to us how these outlier payments have been generated. Second major issue is home health care fraud and hospice fraud. So let's just clear this up. Hospice, end of life, designed 40 years ago, a beautiful program that's designed to take care of you because you have cancer and you're not going to survive more than 6 months. To do that, the federal government says, we're going to trade your Medicare benefit for hospice benefit. So you give up Medicare, because why would you want to have coverage for things you're never going to use? You're dying. You want to die with dignity and grace. It's a beautiful program. Unfortunately, in California and other states, fraudsters have stolen your Medicare number, taken it and given you hospice you didn't want, which means if you get sick and go to the ER, you're not getting care. And you can't even find out what happened because you weren't in the mix of this. There have been a lot of people complaining about this over the years, including people that should have been listened to, like the Auditor General of California, who in 2022 raised this issue to the current governor, and for some reason they have not taken action. Unfortunately, we have a reality that, again, we got to face. A third of all hospices, a third of all these programs in the entire country are in Los Angeles. Ask yourself, how is that possible? It's not. There are not that many people dying in Los Angeles. We're not talking about California, just Los Angeles. So Kim and the team, with Janina Ugo and a bunch of other great folks, went through the list of all the people, and we believe that at least half of the hospices in the entire area around Los Angeles are fraudulent. And today we announced 800 of those hospices have been suspended. That's getting us close to where we think we should be. 800 hospices that last year charged the federal taxpayer $1.4 billion will no longer be paid. Now, Mr. Vice President, if your core business was shut down by the federal government, would you call?
Yes.
You would call. Crickets. We have less than 20 who have complained. We're not even sure those are legitimate. 800 hospices shut down, and we're not hearing much. It's crickets out there. So we believe we're on the right path here. Next is a nationwide moratorium on all new hospice and home health care. Why is that possible? Because when we squeeze the balloon in California and slow their growth of hospice and now take away 800, the payments to 800 hospices, we know what those fraudsters do. They move to nearby Nevada. Next door, Nevada has a 7-fold increase in hospice already. Arizona, Texas, they're moving across the country. So we've today announcing a moratorium nationally. There will be no new hospices or home health care open in this country. If you have the program now, you can keep it. You can go to ones that already exist. We're not taking away any services, but there will be no new ones, licenses granted until we can figure out a better way of working across government. Let me highlight this, because when Andrew, who's leading, and the Vice President are chairing this task force, it's very simple. You have CMS, you have OIG, March Bell sitting over there. You have the Department of Justice, you have the FBI, you have Treasury. You put those things together, you make a powerful fist. And that's the fist we're going to punch through bureaucracies and realities that are stopping our ability to protect the American people. I'm going to leave you one last thought, and then I want to ask Kim to cover some of the issues around the Mufukos and the Medicaid war room that she's creating. It is a reality that states are all over the place in their desire to partner with the Vice President in this task force. There was a letter sent out 2 weeks ago asking every single state to respond within 10 days to whether or not they will be willing to revalidate their providers. What that means is if you're providing home health care services, which are unlicensed people, providing services in undocumented areas that are unverifiable right now in many instances, basically you're having your kids carry the groceries upstairs for you. These are services your family used to provide for you. We asked all the states to work with us to validate if these are legitimate services from legitimate providers. Every single state responded. So contrary to the narrative around red and blue, every state wants to protect their citizens. Some are just more competent or brave enough to actually make those steps. And for some reasons, as you heard today, California has been lax in this endeavor. We hope this wake-up call will be heard loudly across the beautiful state of California, whose people we're trying to protect, sometimes from their own leaders. Kim?
So when we took office a little over a year ago, we were looking at the fraud and abuse issue and saw that it was all pay and chase. We were going after the money after it was already out the door. And so we thought there surely has to be a better way. So we created the Medicare Fraud War Room, where we looked at claims in real time before they were paid so that we could determine, were they legitimate? Were there the outliers that we've heard examples of today? And how could we stop it? Over the past year, since the Medicare War Room started on March 31st of last year, we have stopped over $2 billion from going out the door just by targeting those high-risk providers. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, we've decided to take it a step further, and we're now doing a Medicaid War Room. And what's unique about this is it's the first time that we've ever partnered across the board with our law enforcement partners, the HHS OIG, DOJ, the states, the MFUCAs, the Medicare Fraud Control Units, all working together for the first time to look at Medicaid claims in real time and be able to determine how we can stop those payments from going out the door, to stop the instances of an 89-year-old woman who had over 5,000 skin substitutes, or to stop the types of things that are just really aberrantly ridiculous. So what we've done is we have data analysts, we have forensic auditors, we have law enforcement people, all coming together in a virtual room. It's not an actual room like you think of like on TV, but they're all in a virtual room where they are looking at this in real time and then making determinations about how we can shut those bad guys down and how we can take action. And what has happened is we are now using our administrative authorities, payment suspensions, overpayments, civil monetary penalties, and the HHS OIG exclusion authority to really be able to take action against these people and make it so that we can hopefully bring that money back where it needs to and never let it go out the door. The key is we want to keep it so that it can provide the services for the people who most need it and who most benefit from it, and stop the bad actors from getting all the benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. So Dr. Oz, I want to make sure I understand this well. So you're saying that we kicked off 800 fraudulent healthcare providers off of the Medicare system, and not a single one of them called the government and said, hey, you made a mistake.
We've had a handful of calls. We're not sure they're legitimate yet, but it's less than 20 out of 800, and we're auditing them.
Unbelievable. So at least 780 are not even trying to claim that they're not fraudulent. And again, those are businesses that we were giving hundreds of millions, in some cases billions of dollars to, not to provide services, but to make a fraudster rich. It's just completely insane. Drives home the scale and scope of the problem. Okay, we'll take a few questions. I will say the ground rules are, I will take the easy questions. Any hard questions are for Dr. Oz. Yes.
With NBC News. I want to ask you first on the issue of fraud. As you're saying, if the administration is calling to specifically withhold Medicaid payments, why should the people who rely on those payments suffer the consequences for a state's failure to go after bad actors? And I have another question for you after.
So I want to be clear here. We're talking about withholding the Medicaid fraud enforcement payments that go to the state bureaucrats. We're not talking about withholding people's benefits. We're talking about turning off the resources that the state government should be using to police fraud. And then instead, we're going to use those resources ourselves because we're actually taking the fraud issue very seriously. But I do think it raises a very important issue. There are going to be some, I'm sure, some politicians who say what you're doing here is harming the Medicaid program. We're trying to save the Medicaid program from dysfunctional state bureaucrats. If you allow hundreds of millions, billions, even more money to go out the door, not to healthcare services for low-income families, but to fraudsters, you eventually are going to destroy the Medicaid program. So this is why we say red state, blue state, this does not need to be a political or a partisan issue. We want to work with you to eliminate fraud and make these programs last longer for the people who truly need them.
Thank you. And can I ask you, Mr. Vice President, when approaching the war with Iran, do you agree with the president's position that Americans' financial situations should not be a consideration in that decision-making process?
Well, I don't think the president said that. I think that's a misrepresentation of what the president said. But look, I agree with the president that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. We're obviously engaged in a very aggressive and very engaged diplomatic process to try to ensure that that doesn't happen. And the president has a lot of options, as he said repeatedly. There are options diplomatically, there are options on the military side, but the fundamental goal here is the president wants to make the world safe, but particularly the American people safe from Iran having a nuclear weapon. And one final point I'll say on that is, nuclear proliferation is one of those challenges that people don't realize. It's the biggest threat to America's national security, and it's not obvious until it is. Because what happens if Iran gets a nuclear weapon? Then multiple Gulf Arab countries are going to want to get a nuclear weapon. Then multiple countries from there are going to want to get a nuclear weapon. The goal of preventing nuclear proliferation is probably the single most important thing that we can do to keep our people safe for the long term. It's absolutely a worthy goal. But of course, the president and I and the entire team, we care about the American people's financial situations. It's one of the reasons why we passed the Working Families Tax Cut. It's one of the reasons why we're so focused on fraud. We care about how the American people are doing economically. We've also got a number of other challenges. Of course, the president has to confront all these challenges simultaneously. Yeah.
Edward Lawrence from Fox Business. On fraud, the savings that you find among all of these states, what impact could that have on a federal deficit?
Well, I think it'd have a very big impact, but a lot of it does depend on how well the states work with us. We think we're going to be much more effective if we're working with California as opposed to fighting California over every $1 billion of Medicaid fraud that exists in their system. I mean, there could be tens of billions, hundreds of billions of fraudulent payments within the California system if you count what's going to illegal aliens, if you count what's going to people, fraudulent businesses, if you count what's not going to the people who actually need it, but going to fraudsters. We would find that money a lot easier if California was working with us, which is why we've taken some of these steps. And the letters fundamentally are outreach. We're going to the states and saying, here are the things that we can do to work on this issue together. And of course, if they don't work with us, there are going to be penalties. We don't want to get there. We want to work with these guys. You heard Dr. Oz say this earlier. I've looked at the numbers myself. It's true. If you just deal with the fraud issue, you can prolong the Medicare and Medicaid trust funds well into the future. So it does have a significant budgetary impact, whether that's hundreds of billions of dollars or maybe even more. We're not going to know until we do the work, but we're going to do the work.
Yeah, if I could on China.
Let's do one question from each person. Go ahead. We can do both, you guys. You guys can fight for who goes first.
Sure. Mr. Vice President, Reagan Reese with the Daily Caller. What's your reaction to the alleged home health fraud in Ohio, and why do you think this is happening in a red state? And just a question of clarification. You mentioned that some states aren't cooperating. What does that look like? Are they not responding to your calls? Are they stonewalling you guys? If you could expand on that.
So I'll let Dr. Oz go into the details a little bit, but on the Ohio issue in particular, look, this happens everywhere. We're a big country, hundreds of billions of dollars goes out the door every single month from the federal government, and inevitably you're going to have people who try to take advantage of it. What bothers me is not that you have a few fraudsters out there, it's that the government hasn't taken seriously pushing it back. You're always going to have bad people. You're always going to have a few bad apples try to take advantage of the system. What's so unique about this country until recently is that we didn't take that seriously. We didn't try to push back against the fraud, and that's what's changed. When I talk about cooperating with these various states, and again, we've had some good cooperation with both red states and blue states, it's very context specific. But for example, let's say that we know we have a number of fraudulent Medicare or Medicaid providers. Working with the federal government to identify who those are, to kick them off the rolls so that when those companies, those fraudulent companies submit a reimbursement, they don't actually get any money in return. Now, sometimes the federal government has a better perspective on that, sometimes the states do, but that's one example of ensuring that local providers that are fraudulent are not able to get reimbursed or not able to get access to the resources. That's just one example. Dr. Oz, I'm sure you probably have 100 more in that brain of yours.
Very succinctly, Minnesota, which we announced the deferment there when the Vice President and I were in this room several months ago, sued us. And we're trying to get them to wake up to a problem. The amount that we deferred was a small percentage of their rainy day fund. They sued us and sought a temporary restraining order. That's not what a partner does. The judge did not give them a temporary restraining order. We're going to California now in part because we couldn't get them to respond on things that we think they should have taken proactive steps on. If they've been warned for at least 4 years by their own auditor general that there's a massive problem with hospice and they don't deal with it, it pollutes the entire ecosystem. It creates corruption that rots the foundation of who we are. So on the 19th of December, after it had gone through all the different processes, the State Department of Health in California was going to mandate by the first of the year that you cannot have more than one hospice per provider. This is a red flag issue. Why would a doctor need to have 20 hospices? You have one hospice, do it right. They do 20 hospices because they're taking bribes, they're selling their license and their soul. For reasons we don't understand, and I'd love to pose that right here to the state of California, someone very senior in their government pulled down that rule, never let it issue, and we never got help from them. That's why we went out the first week of January to say, what's going on here? And we find out that, as the Vice President mentioned, the Medicare fraud detection units sometimes are not being enabled to do their jobs. These are the kinds of behaviors that people take when they're trying to hide the ball. And question I'd love to ask the media to opine amongst yourselves, we're debating it as a task force, is do the governors always feel that fraud in Medicaid is a flaw? Or are there sometimes some reasons why it might be a benefit? It might be a feature of the way they're running Medicaid. The same way we had to stop legalized money laundering through state-directed payments and provider taxes and the Working Families Tax Cut legislation, we are concerned that some governors see these programs as jobs programs. And there are downstream impact of that resembles political patronage that we're very serious about.
Mr. Vice President, thank you so much. Leonardo Feldman with Newsweek. Can you tell me a little bit about, the president has been toying this idea of a joint ticket between you and Rubio. What do you think about that?
Oh, man. What I think is there are a few topics that I want to talk about less than what office I'm going to run for years down the road when I'm having a good time and trying to do good work in the job that the American people already elected me to do. Look, as I've answered this question probably in any number of ways. I love Marco. I think he's a great Secretary of State. He's become a very, very dear friend. But I think both of us are very much focused on accomplishing the American people's business right now. If I was the American people, there are a few things that I would hate more than a person who's barely been in one office for a year and a half, who's angling for a job 2.5 years down the road. Let's do a good job now. We just got to keep at it. Go ahead. Oh, God.
Just quick, I have a fraud question. This is Kit with CNN. It's not us who are bringing this up. A couple days ago, Trump made this statement to people in the Rose Garden. Why do you think he does that? Do you think it's a little bit of toying with you both over your succession? Why do you think he brings that up? Just number one.
Well, I just don't think it sounds like the President of the United States to have a televised competition for who would succeed him as his apprentice. I just think that's not at all what you would expect the President to do. But no, I think the president, he's always been fascinated by politics. If you talk to him, he was fascinated by politics 30 years before he ever ran for office. So I think it's natural for him to, joke around with us a little bit, to play around with the idea. But I can tell you the president is as focused as any of us on making sure we do as good of a job now for the American people.
What are you going to be announcing, and are you engaging in good faith with the governor there about efforts? She said that she responded to a CMS letter. Just curious if there's any back and forth between you both.
Yeah, there's been some back and forth. We'd love to have a better conversation, a better relationship, and work very deliberately on this question of fraud. And certainly have an open hand, have an open heart in this White House to working with anybody, including the governor of Maine. I'm not going to tell you everything I'm going to say tomorrow in Maine, because if I did that, why would I go to Maine tomorrow? But I'm looking forward to it. It's a beautiful time of year to be in the state of Maine. We're going to campaign a little bit with Paul LePage and talk about the fraud efforts that we have going on, and talk about a few other things as well. Thank you.
President, this is Elizabeth Mitchell with the Daily Signal. The Fraud Task Force and ICE identified more than 10,000 alleged cases of fraud in the optional practical training program. Some Republicans have been calling for this program to end. In light of this, is the Trump administration looking into changes to this program in light of the fraud?
Sorry, changes to which program in particular?
The optional practical training program.
Yeah, so we're looking into a lot of this stuff, and the fundamental question obviously is we want to save the American people money, but we're also trying to preserve programs that exist for the benefit of the American people. We're also trying to make sure that we do this in a way that's defensible, that's not going to get challenged in a court, or if it does get challenged in a court, where we can defend things. So, Dr. Oz, do you want to say anything about that particular program? We're looking at everything. I will tell you that once a week I get an update from Andrew and from the team on the number of things that we found in the anti-fraud task force, and it's kind of shocking. People, I go on the road and talk to, a lot of folks out there. I was in Iowa last week, and one of the most common questions I got was, is the anti-fraud thing, is it hard? And I'm almost confused by the question because, unfortunately, there's so much fraud in the federal government. There was so much that we allowed to accumulate over the 4 years of the Biden administration and, frankly, probably over 40 years of bad American governance. There is so much fraud for us to go after. What we're trying to do is go after the highest value targets and the things that preserve these programs for the American people. Yes, sir.
Record piece with the Federalist. Thank you. You said that administrators they don't care or that they're neglectful with the funding, but does your team think that there are bureaucrats in federal or state governments who are actually complicit in helping fraudsters?
Well, we think it's possible, right? I don't want to prejudge these things, but we've certainly seen reports of, for example, Gavin Newsom in California or Tim Walz in Minnesota getting these reports that there were fraudulent activities happening in their states and then looking the other way. Whether that rises to the level of criminal conduct, I don't know, but we're certainly looking into it because as much as we care about protecting these programs, we also care about ensuring that federal and state officers aren't violating the law. And if they are violating the law, then of course we have to prosecute them. That's an important part of equal justice under law. So we're looking into this stuff, but I can't commit to it because unlike the last administration, we tend to only prosecute people when they've actually violated the law, not just because they have the wrong political affiliation. Yeah, go ahead.
Dead Americans on food stamps. I'll do this again. Dead Americans on food stamps, you mentioned the other day, 186,000 dead Americans, to your knowledge, are receiving food stamps. Are you confident that you can get that number down to zero?
Well, I want to be clear, I don't actually think 186,000 dead Americans are receiving food stamps because that would be impossible. I don't think that we have 186,000 ghosts walking into the grocery store and achieving benefits. I think that we have people who are claiming that they are getting food stamp benefits. They're using the identity of a dead person. So it's very much a living person. It's a living fraudster who's stealing the identity of a dead American. I just want to be very clear about that. But look, we know this is happening. We think that it's costing the American people hundreds of billions of dollars. By the way, another hidden cost of fraud is that it drives up the cost of goods for everybody. Because if you've got hundreds of billions of dollars chasing food that is going to dead Americans, living fraudsters, that's going to raise costs for everybody. So it actually is one of these things that has multiple victims, including the fact that it's driving up the cost of good for other Americans.
And on the
yes,
China
all the way in the
summit,
back. No, sorry, man. You got two, I think. I really like your jacket, but still only one question. I'm going to stick to my rule here.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Daniel Baldwin, One American News. You spoke a little bit about states cooperating, and that was a big theme the first time you and Dr. Oz came here and spoke to us about the Minnesota Medicare payments.
Sure.
You referenced Maryland as a blue state that's cooperating. You mentioned red states that were cooperating. Have you guys been successful in putting up any guardrails with states that have cooperated thus far, and what do those guardrails look like?
Well, the biggest guardrail is the one that we announced today, which is that if you have all of this money that's going for Medicare fraud prevention or Medicaid fraud prevention and you're not actually using it, we're going to take that money back and use it with our prosecutors and our investigators to ensure that we're actually looking at fraud. And then what that would do eventually is it would allow us to actually engage in some other enforcement actions. If they're not taking the anti-fraud stuff seriously, then there are some additional steps that we can take beyond that. I think the approach that we've tried to take really has been collaborative. We've tried to identify with the states, here are some examples of some very bad fraud, here are some things that you can do to fix it, here are some ways that we're willing to use our resources to help you. And again, most states have been pretty good. There have been a few, unfortunately, very large states that collect a lot of money in federal revenue, and I think a lot of us know why that is. You have political leadership that doesn't like the idea of cooperating with a Republican administration, even though it's a very common sense, good government principle. I think you have some people who know that a lot of their constituencies, maybe some of their donors are getting rich from fraud, but regardless, red state or blue state, we're going to go after it. We have to. This is so important. We are not going to have a generous country if Americans think that they're paying their taxes not to needy people, but to fraudsters. That's fundamentally what we're trying to fix, is rebuilding America's trust. That when you pay your taxes, when you send money to a program, it's actually going to the people it's supposed to go to. It's a fundamental principle of good governance. It shouldn't be anything Republican or Democrat. It's just good government. Yep. Go ahead.
Taylor with Spectrum, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You've emphasized a lot how you want this not to be partisan, and you're going to look at red and blue states. The president, when he posted about you becoming the fraud czar last month, he wrote, the focus will be everywhere, but primarily in those blue states where crooked Democrat politicians have had a free-for-all. I'm curious, as you guys have been trying to interact with these states, do you worry that the president's remarks like that undercut the efforts for this not to be partisan and that could lead to resistance?
No, I don't worry about that because he's talking about crooked governors. And of course, if you have a crooked governor, they're not going to work with us, and we're going to have to use other tools to ensure that they do. But I think that there are a lot of governors, Democrat and Republican, who recognize that this is a very serious problem, that we're offering resources to try to help solve that problem. And I think a lot of them recognize that, yeah, they've got maybe a few crazy people in very far left states, but most people, most Americans want to solve this problem. And I've actually been gratified by the fact that we've gotten a lot of cooperation from across the political spectrum. One other point about cooperation, we're not there yet, but one of the things we're going to do on the fraud task force is, look, we're learning. We're learning a lot about the way the government operates. I mean, Andrew I almost feel bad for him sometimes because he comes to me once a week and says, here's this bureaucrat hurdle, or here's a wall that I would have never known even existed until we started to take this fraud stuff very seriously. So we've learned a lot over the last 6 months. We are eventually going to realize that there are tools that we do not have, that there are things that we need to do that Congress is going to have to step in and cooperate on us. I think that's going to be a big question of bipartisanship and common sense is when we identify some tools that we need to more fully go after the fraud problem, is Congress willing to play ball, or are they going to fight us every step of the way? I hope they play ball. Partisanship is crazy in this town, but again, this is such a common sense thing that I would hope that everybody would want to protect the American taxpayers. Go ahead.
CBS News. On Iran, can you tell us where negotiations stand? The president, before he left for Beijing, called the latest proposal unacceptable. So is the U.S. even talking to the Iranians right now, or where are?
Yeah, so look, obviously these negotiations are very sensitive. I'm not going to tell you everything because we're trying to have a productive conversation. I spent a good amount of time on the phone with both Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff this morning, a number of our friends in the Arab world this morning. Look, I think that we are making progress. The fundamental question is, do we make enough progress that we satisfy the president's red line? And the red line is very simple. He needs to feel confident that we've put a number of protections in place such that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, right? That is the question. Do we meet that threshold or not? I think that we've made a lot of progress since we left Pakistan. I thought we made some progress in Pakistan, but we've made more since then. But that is fundamentally what we're negotiating towards, is we want to be able to look the American people in the eye and say with confidence that you are not going to have to worry about this very, very dangerous regime having access to the most dangerous weapons in the world. That's the goal that we're focused on. Again, there's a lot of ways to accomplish that goal. The president has set us off on the diplomatic pathway for now, and that's what I'm focused on. Yep. We'll do a couple more here.
Thanks a lot. There was pushback from Senate Republicans yesterday in the conference meeting about the cost of the ballroom, which has ballooned to about $1 billion for the security aspect. Is there an IG, either for GSA or the Treasury, who would or should be eyeballing that project? And how do we make sure it doesn't balloon like some of these other government spending building projects?
Well, I'm sure because of the nature of the project, you're going to have inspector generals who look at this, who look at the auditing, who look at the accounting, who make sure that this is done in a good way. I will say the President of the United States is a very good builder. And the reason why this is expensive is not because of the ballroom. The reason this is expensive is because of the security precautions necessary, things that have nothing to do with the ballroom itself, but have to do with the actual security infrastructure on the White House. We saw a couple of weeks ago what can happen when you gather the President of the United States and a number of people who are in the line of succession in the same room. We almost had something very terrible happen. And thanks to the Secret Service and their incredibly quick response, we didn't have a terrible thing happen. But one of the things it's taught us is that we've got to update. And there are things, frankly, I wouldn't even talk about in a public forum. There are parts of the there are parts of our national security, and there are parts of the international sort of world that are very, very dangerous. And the president needs to be protected. The senior officials in our government need to be protected. And that's fundamentally what this is all about, is ensuring that on the White House grounds, we have what's necessary to protect the president, whether he's engaged in a state dinner, which of course is an important part of the president's functions, or whether he's engaged in the day-to-day functions of being president of the United States. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. My question is, what's your message to Americans as the Iran war continues to impact the economy, especially after yesterday's inflation report?
Well, I guess my message to Americans is we know that we have a lot of work to do in order to deliver on the prosperity that the American people deserve. The president is hyper aware of this. I'm hyper aware of this. We talk about it all the time. We know that the American people inherited a very bad inflation crisis. Yes, the inflation number last month was not great, but take it back to the May of 2023 in the Biden administration, or take it back to even further. We're not seeing anything like what we saw under the Biden administration, and that's a problem in and of itself. Because what it means is that a lot of Americans saw their wages eaten away under the Biden administration. They saw the values of their paycheck eaten away during the Biden administration. And one of the things we were elected to do, of course, was to fix that problem. And I promise you the president is laser focused every day on fixing that problem. Now, what I will also say is that whether it's the working families tax cuts, putting more money in the pockets of the American people, whether it's bringing a lot of investment into the United States so that we can build the factories and the jobs of the future, the president's laser focused. This stuff does take time. In the same way that the Biden administration's inflation crisis ate away at workers' paychecks for 4 years, it's going to take us a little bit of time before we get workers in a position where we feel like we can look them in the eye and say, you are much, much better off, but that's what we're trying to do. We're going to keep on working at it. I think we made a lot of progress. If you look at the average household wage increase since Donald Trump became president, it's gone up. But we came from a pretty deep hole. We're digging meaning a pretty deep hole, the Biden administration. We're digging ourselves out of it. And what I want is for us to completely dig out of that hole and then to build a brighter and better and more prosperous future for the American people. That's what they elected us to do, and that's very much what we're focused on. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Can we quantify the amount of fraud that's related to illegal immigrants? And what are the asks of California and these other states? What can they do to claw back some of this money that's being deferred?
You know, I don't know that you can quantify it because it's so hard to keep track of all of the criminal migrants who are taking advantage of our system. I mean, they're taken advantage by, the average criminal migrant that we have in an American prison is costing us $60,000 to $120,000 a year, depending on the location. They're collecting health care benefits. A couple of states, California and New York in particular, they actually allow illegal aliens to benefit from the American people's, health care programs, which is just a disgrace. And just a travesty. I mean, if you go into an emergency room, you should know that you're waiting in line with other American citizens, not with people who have been placed to the front of the line by a fraudulent Medicaid program in California, but that's what's happening. We know this is what's happening, and again, it's driving up costs for everybody, it's making it harder to access health care, and it's absolutely fleecing the American taxpayer. It is a lose-lose-lose proposition. I've seen efforts to try to quantify this. I think the answer is hundreds of billions of dollars a year, whether it's 300 or 6, it is a lot of money between Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, prison fees, everything that goes into the criminal migrant problem in the United States of America. It's a lot of money. And again, I talk about the American people. We're a generous country. We're a generous people. I love that about this country. But part of that generosity is that it extends to our fellow Americans. We cannot give Medicare and Medicaid benefits to all over the world. It's going to bankrupt those programs. They ought to belong to Americans first. And that, to me, is the fundamental meaning of America First, is that all of us take a look at our programs, take a look at the fraud, and we say, how do we ensure that the federal government works for the American people first? That's what we're doing every single day, and we're going to keep at it. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you for joining us for our extended coverage, including the Vice President's Fraud Task Force briefing. My name is Rick Robinson. I'll be back tonight starting at 7 p.m. Eastern for Inquiry right here live on KLRMradio.com. Also for our Digital Beacon News folks. Not sure when we'll be spinning that one up again. We usually save that for news and special events. Bye, everybody.